Greetings and welcome to the Quest for Wisdom podcast, where we search for nuggets of wisdom from the lives of some truly amazing people. Today's guest is Arnoldo Guerra. Arnold obtained a bachelor's degree in physics from Berkeley and a subsequent master's in physics from the University of Barcelona. He is now completing his PhD in physics, and his research spans the area of theoretical and mathematical physics. When he's not nose deep in physics papers, Arnold is an avid climber and explorer with a passion for mountains. He is also a purple belt in Jiu Jitsu. Today we talk about theoretical physics, the speed of light, gravity and aliens, wartime and morality, and finish with a long debate on gun crime and policy in the USA. Arnold is a curious and highly intelligent human who tries to push the boundaries of the known in his research. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Welcome, Arnold Guerra IV to the 8th episode of the Quest for Wisdom podcast.
Thanks,
How does that make you feel?
I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you. Arnold is actually officially the most complicated of my guests. He specifically requested that the background be changed to the Matterhorn Mountains to reflect his love for the Matterhorn Mountain.
Yeah, and the mountains in general. Thank you for that, by the way, for
Yeah.
that adjustment.
No problem. We had a little bit of technical issues. I'm not that familiar with the program, but we've got it sorted, and I think it's looking pretty nice, actually. So, Arnold, you are a theoretical physicist.
Yeah,
You are a human. You
I think
are a climber.
I do some climbing.
You do some
I do
climbing.
some climbing.
You're also a purple belt in Jiu Jitsu.
Yeah, that's true.
And you are what else?
Yeah. I'm a son. I'm a brother. I'm a friend.
Sounds like a song.
A little bit of a yeah. We're writing some lyrics to a song, and this is how it started. Yeah, I dabble in quite a bit of different areas of life, as I know a lot of people do. So
Nice. So we actually met about a year and a bit ago, I think, at what I would describe as a hippie event.
it was very hippie.
Would you describe yourself as a hippie theoretical physicist?
I am a theoretical physicist that likes to hang out with hippies at times.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely something to be learned from hanging out with hippies.
I love the term, by the way, because it's existed for decades,
Mm,
and also it paints a picture. But then it's also so broad, right? Like you can't exactly know what it.
yeah. How do you define hippie? Anti-establishment?
A bit of anti-establishment for sure.
Long hair?
Sometimes I would say spiritual. There's a spiritual
Spiritual.
component.
Smoking weed?
Smoking weed is a component. Usually psychedelics might be art, just like
Yeah.
very artsy.
Ill-fitting clothes?
Maybe, yeah.
Baggy
Sometimes.
trousers?
Not conventional fashion.
Not conventional
That's
fashion.
for sure. Yeah.
And that was definitely the event that we met at. It was a friend's birthday, and
Yeah.
she is somewhat of a cult leader in the making, I believe.
Yes, and a lovely person.
A lovely
And I'd love to
person.
hang out with her more. Actually, she's one of these people that, for whatever reason, life, I just don't hit up as much,
Mm.
because I've got my things going on and she's got hers.
Yeah, that is the
But she's
sad
a
thing
lovely
about
person.
life.
Yeah, it happens. We get busy and we can easily disconnect if we don't put in the effort to stay in touch.
Yeah. So she started up a little thing called the Roro tribe. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but it seems to be a load of people, load of hippies, getting together in Barcelona and doing all these various different events. And they've got some big houses in like farmhouses in the countryside, and they go there and they do different events. I think it's pretty cool. Hence
Yeah.
why she's a bit of a cult leader in the making. Hopefully, she stays on the right side of the
I
track.
think so.
I think she's on that path, but you never know.
You never know.
You never know. People,
You never know with cults.
You never know with cults. Like,
I don't know if it's a cult. It does have culty vibes. I would say in general though, even yoga groups can start to get culty. Like in a positive way though. Sometimes I think even if we think of just groups of people getting together and spending time. there's always going to be negative things that happen, but for the most part, I think there's a tendency for good.
Yeah, let's hope so. I mean, I've been told by, I would say, more than 10 people in my life that I'd make a good cult leader.
Dude,
So
I
I'm
can see
hoping,
it.
so I'm hoping that hopefully I stay on the right side of the track as well, because the
Yeah.
dark side is tempting. It's something I find.
Hmm.
The allure of eternal dark knowledge is definitely there.
What kind of darkness are we talking here? If you could specify, I'm
Well, like
curious.
I've
Because
always
I
been in,
like darkness, by the way.
well,
Go
I've
ahead.
always been interested in the occult, and I've
Yeah.
conceptually interested. I'd like to say I don't dabble very much,
Okay.
but I like the concept of it. But in books and movies, people that dabble in the occult wind up in bad situations.
Hmm.
So I'm thinking, let's not bother doing that, Connor,
Hmm.
because again, the reason I want to dabble in the occult is because it's like, oh, eternal knowledge. Read from this ancient Egyptian book of the dead and find out all these secrets about life and the afterlife and traveling through time and all this different stuff and leaving your body and astral projection. I'm like, this all sounds so cool.
Right.
But then you hear stories about people astral projecting and not being able to find their way back to their body and then
Hmm.
basically becoming comatose and all this stuff. And I'm like, ooh, do I want to try that? Like, there is
My guess is it wouldn't happen.
your guess
But
is it
maybe I'm
wasn't
trying to
happen.
maybe I'm trying to recruit you
Yeah,
over here and
exactly. So maybe I don't want to
yeah.
listen to your opinion, but are you familiar with Freddie Silver?
No.
No. So Freddie Silver, he is a British, I don't know what you'd call him, like historian, journalisty type person. And him, along with a few other people, mainly Graham Hancock, they are leading a new branch of alternative history, pushing forward new theories for where we came from, the past, basically.
Hmm.
Um, Technologies that existed, civilizations that existed, etc. And he tells the story of going into the pyramids in Giza. Like, you can pay a load of money and go into them, have private tours. And he said that in the king's, I believe it's in the king's chamber, you can go in the sarcophagus, and he basically had this crazy out of body experience. Um, and some other people had done it, and they basically got lost and couldn't find their way back to their body and all this stuff. And then they had to shut down the pyramids.
I
Could
want
be
to go. I
true.
want to go.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Let's
I'm
go.
hoping to go to Egypt in a couple of months. I don't have enough money, I don't think, to pay to go in there
It's probably
privately.
expensive.
And I
Yeah.
really like, and I think they maybe stopped doing the private tours because it's like we're talking like tens of thousands of dollars, pounds, whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's that, and then there's another thing. There's a woman called Madame Blavatsky, and she was around, I think, in about the late 1800s. She was born in, I think, Russia, and she basically went like traveling by herself all over the world and wrote all these books, like really ahead of her time, considering she was female and doing all this different stuff. And she got into spirituality and like alternative religion and all these different things. And she, I believe she was part of, she maybe she wasn't part of this, but she's linked to this thing called like the Rosicruciferians or something like that. And these people claim to be able to meet in their dreams.
Damn.
Um, and like, obviously, the skeptic in you says bullshit, but then I'm also like of the opinion that virtually anything is possible, and the actual limit of human ability is what we understand about human ability, and the mind and consciousness is so small compared to the actual limits. And I also believe that in the past, other civilizations have had really strong abilities, like more psychic abilities and things like that, that we've lost as technology's improved. Um, how does that fit into your understanding as a theoretical physicist?
uh, yeah. Well, I tend to be from the school of thought that says, things that are mystery, best to just um, ask questions, and I try not to have much of an opinion on certain things that uh, I would personally consider to be mysteries. Uh, yeah, I say from a theoretical physics standpoint, I gravitate towards no pun intended, um, towards evidence based type things. Uh, I certainly believe that there is a lot that we do not understand, and anything is possible in that realm. But yeah, the point that step of then making a sort of speculation, I try to be very careful about. And if I do make a speculation, I would want it to be based on some kind of evidence. But then again, we could be just completely fooled, right? We could, the what is it? The evil genius could be tricking
Mm-hmm.
us, right? I mean, we could be in a Matrix sort of situation. Who knows? Where when you count 1, 2, 3, 4, you actually miss a number or something, and counting four is actually five, right? So our perception of four is five. These sorts of things, the arguments. I think Descartes was the one that kind of made some of these arguments. Uh, I think therefore I am, famously by Descartes. So yeah, we could be tricked by the evil genius. Everything could be just a total fallacy, a total, uh, you know, mistake in a way. And
Yeah, see, this is my I wouldn't say issue, but this is my concern when the word evidence is used. Because I'm
right,
like, okay, you can pull up 5 pieces of evidence to prove your theory, but that doesn't make your theory correct. And it might only make your theory correct for a certain amount of time
right,
until new evidence arrives, and that theory is then wrong. And like you say, could just be that our whole framework of understanding of everything is wrong. Like, for example, four is actually five. And like a good example of a more easy to conceptualize example of what you just mentioned is in Western music, it, primarily in Western music, we use the scale A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
hmm,
However, you go to more like Persian music,
yeah,
and they use notes that are of frequencies that are different to the standard frequencies we use.
yeah,
So their
interesting,
scales are totally, they don't exist in our framework of scales because the frequencies don't match.
right. That's
And
interesting,
they have a whole different framework for what music is. That's why,
right,
like that kind of like Arabian Persian-y music to us sounds so like, to me it sounds so mystical and like
right.
woo, because they're notes that our brains aren't used to.
That's awesome.
Which is really cool, and it is exactly that. And it's
Absolutely,
like you've got infinite divisions with numbers. You've got infinite divisions of everything, up and down,
right.
and maybe we're focused on the wrong ones.
Yeah, I think the spirit of science is that you accept certain things as axioms, and you deduce what you can starting from that point, because you have to start somewhere. And but the truth is that there's always in the back of the mind of a let's say of a open-minded thinker
Mm.
that those axioms could actually be uh, just not the right ones, or just you know incorrect altogether, or perhaps, who knows, right? I mean, there's many things, but you have to start somewhere, and so the spirit of science is based on a starting point. Let's see what we can find out. And so yeah, it depends on what you mean, for example, by the word correct, right? If you have a theory, if it's correct, what do we mean in the world of science, especially in physics, actually all of science. uh, Things are only correct, so to speak, up to a certain point, up to a
Hmm.
certain scale. There's going to be error that you take into consideration, and then you think of, what error is acceptable and what is not acceptable based on whatever question it is you're asking, and the questions you ask are within the context of a certain starting point. Uh, but yeah, something is never totally correct. And actually, in the world of theoretical physics, there's always this clash between the theoretical physicists of what is correct and what's not correct. The more mathematical physicists, who are not necessarily trying to discuss phenomenology of how specific kinds of particles interact with one another, but just in general trying to understand the landscape of theories that can describe physical phenomena. uh, those mathematical physicist types are willing to study a much broader sort of set of ideas and theories, versus the phenomenologists might be sitting in a corner being like, "You guys are crazy. This has nothing to do with our universe. This is incorrect. You're wasting your time." so on and so forth. And there's this clash, and it's a cultural clash within a small community. I mean, the community of theoretical physics is pretty small, I would say. I mean,
Shock
everybody,
horror.
yeah, people know each other. It's yeah, so yeah, that clash is very real. I have it with mathematicians when I go with my mathematician friends, for example, they'll not accept some theoretical physics because, the theoretical physics jumped past some specific definition or some specific trick that use some specific trick that jumps past some definition or something that is a bit mathematically speaking not rigorous. The mathematicians, they go from A to B, B to C, C to
Mm.
D, if this, then this and that. It's very precise. There's no there's no room for a lot of the time, no room for just hand waving. And theoretical physicists is not like that usually. It's for the most part hand waving. It's throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think that's one of the things that I know very, very little about theoretical physics, obviously. But like one of the things that just in the it seems like a total juxtaposition, theoretical
Hmm.
and physics, because it's like
Yeah,
the way I think of it is that like you're mentioning there, maths, physics, science, chemistry, biology, all of those things, they are structured. They have rules. They are effectively, you're looking for the correct answer. You're looking for A plus B equals C. 1 plus 2 equals 3. Like all of those type of things. And everything has to kind of balance and equate properly. And so those fields attract a certain type of person generally who is a person that likes a lot of order and likes things to be correct and likes to be searching for those correct answers. But then, obviously, when you throw theoretical in, that throws that all out the window because, like, you're trying to push the boundaries.
yeah,
You're trying to break apart those theories. So I can see where it would ruffle some feathers
yeah,
because you're effectively shattering people's world. Like
absolutely.
they're when their world and their work and everything is built up and it reaches a certain level where maybe they've worked for 40 years on one specific thing and they're the expert of that thing and then someone comes along and smashes it apart. Like, how would you deal with that?
It's very emotional for a lot of people.
Oh, it's crazy, and it's something that it's something that I've thought of a lot. These two people I mentioned, Graham Hancock and Freddie Silver, there are many others, but they have effectively done that with archaeology, and they've got so much stick for it because they are presenting Ancient Apocalypse on Netflix. The series, it's amazing, um, and Ancient Civilizations as well. There's about 3 series of that, but they they've smashed apart the whole concept of human evolution, basically. Not evolution necessarily, but like civilization, the evolution of civilization, when that happened, where that happened,
Hmm.
the technology that was involved, and all these things. And they present it in a way where they present the evidence as so strong that you almost cannot disagree with them.
Right.
Obviously, I'm not there testing their carbon dating and all these things, so I have no idea. But there's enough people that believe what they're saying that I believe them because it seems to be they get rejected by the dinosaurs in the industry, who have been doing it for a long time, and in
Yeah.
order to accept their new theory, would have to basically reject their own belief and life's work. And it's
Yeah.
one of the things that stops science from moving as quickly as
Yeah.
it could
Yeah.
because you have to basically wait for a generation to die um,
Pretty much.
for then
More or
new things
less.
to come out.
Yeah.
So, how do you, where do you start like, where do you start in a theoretical physics problem?
Yeah.
How do you go about that?
Well, me personally, it's just poking into things I'm curious about. I mean, it's the same process as the process I go through when I'm curious about, let's say, World War II history. I tend to actually be very interested in war history and actually military tactics. I know very little, but I think it's interesting. Another thing that I find it quite interesting uh, is along the world of philosophy,
Hmm.
and I'm no expert by any means. in philosophy, but it's just asking questions and being curious and just poking, googling. Well, in the case of physics, I don't use Google specifically for the most part. It's papers, research papers, but yeah, it's just poking in, googling random stuff, or searching random stuff that uh, is in the sphere of what I'm curious about, and then more questions arise. I mean, it's really not difficult to get lost because there's so much that can be asked. And yeah, I think that it is important to have some sort of something you're shooting towards. And I do have those sorts of ideas in mind, but they have to be very flexible as well, because maybe what you're asking isn't the thing to be asked, or maybe it's already something that's answered, and okay, if it's already answered, then you find the answer and that's it. But then and as a researcher, you're trying to ask questions that are going to provide new insights into whatever it is that you might be thinking about.
So you would come up with like just a base theory, just something that you have something that you have just maybe a hunch, or based on some evidence you think maybe this might be correct, and then you start trying to
Sort of.
dig holes in other people's work and
No, well, there are very basic. When I say basic, I don't mean that to bring down the level of ideas, but I mean, like, there are some basic ideas, concepts that we just don't understand. I'll give you one example. The universe is expanding.
Mhm.
Our universe, as based on observations, uh, we know that it's expanding, and it's accelerating in the way that it expands. It's expanding at an accelerated rate, and in order for that to happen, there has to be some kind of energy present in the actual space and time that causes that to happen. At least this is how we think of it, and
Mhm.
we call it dark energy.
Mhm.
But there's no
Understanding
understanding
of
of what it is. And based on, if you look at all the matter in the universe and all the things that we can observe in the universe today, you look into the cosmos, dark energy is, 75% of all those, it would constitute 75% of all the things that are, in this mix of what we call the universe. Uh, so that's like a very basic. You could say it's in some sense, right, a basic thing, right? Like, the universe is expanding. Why?
Mhm.
Well, we don't understand what it is that's causing this expansion. We know that it's expanding. We don't know what's causing it.
Mhm.
So in that sense, it's in the back of every physicist's mind, in some sense, and you might forget about it because you might have other questions, because there's other things that are just like very right there in your face, right? You don't have to necessarily go searching a ton. But then you might ask, oh, have some people thought about this? And then you ask questions about why they're thinking about it that way, and if there's a better, or a different way, or what, more advantageous way in a specific context is to think about this specific thing. And you go down the rabbit hole, and 50 more questions pop up, and then to answer each one of those 50 questions, you go down 50 rabbit holes, each of which provide you another 50 or 100 questions even, and then it's just endless. And but then the main question, let's say, why is the universe expanding, for example, might still be in the back of your mind. uh so yeah, it's a bit of that, but it's yeah, I mean, I think creativity is very, very much necessary, because you're trying to make sense of a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
uh, yeah, and there's all sorts of personalities in at least in theoretical physics. I mean, you have the more creative types, and you have the less creative but more orderly types, and that's why we collaborate and work together, so we can, as a team, succeed in understanding something that otherwise, as individuals, we might not be able to understand.
So which type are you?
I would say very creative. I'm
Mhm.
not very good with, like, super hardcore calculations. I do them because it just so happens that in my team I would be the only guy doing them. But that's not my strength. There are people who are far better at calculating stuff that's just very tedious. and I'll make dumb mistakes, and I have to go and correct them. And I know people who can calculate at a point where they would do it 5 times faster than me, and twice as accurately, and not have to go back. So calculating and keeping that order, step by step, that is not my strength. I mean, I would say I'm okay. I'm good at it, but I'm not great at it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then reading through papers and all that, that's what I would say is my uh what I have to offer to a group,
Mm-hmm.
and then asking questions and combining ideas, that sort of thing is what I tend to gravitate towards.
Yeah, because it's interesting that you mentioned that there are some of these basic questions that we still don't understand, like
Yeah.
why is the universe expanding? Like what is dark energy? I'm sure there's many others, but I was listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson a while back,
Uh-huh.
and he made I don't want to misquote him here, but he made a statement along the lines of we basically know everything there is to know at the moment, like in terms of physics, and when again I don't want to misquote him, but that was the gist of what he was saying, and I was kind of thinking, but we don't. Like there's obviously like in terms of like what we can see and touch and those type of things. Okay, yeah, we might understand, a good majority,
Yeah.
but as far as I understood it, like what he was saying, it just seemed to me like there's loads of questions that are just totally unanswered, which I just thought was strange for someone of his esteem to be making a statement like that. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'd be curious to actually hear his statement there, because the devil's always in the details.
Yeah, true.
Um, yeah, certainly there's plenty of mysteries and we don't understand. But if I had to guess, perhaps one of the things that he might have been thinking about, one of the lines along which he might have been thinking, is perhaps saying, uh, based on what we have understood, we've sort of reached this threshold that we've saturated, and now we need like like a revolution, or some kind a complete paradigm shift. And before that paradigm shift, we've reached this maximum, uh, relative to a paradigm shift that needs to occur in order to answer the endless mysteries that are upon us today. Maybe it was along those lines. I don't know. I'll check out this this statement of his. But
Yeah, I'll try find it
I
because maybe I've just done him a terrible injustice there. But I just remember,
no no.
I remember when I was listening, I remember thinking like it's a bit of a weird thing to say. Um,
It does sound weird to me, which is why I'm curious about the context.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, I mean, there's certainly the way it's interesting, the history of how science progresses and sort of the sociology of how it progresses, and how things happen. It's science is invented by human beings, at least the way in which we study science. It's invented by human beings, and there's no theory of how things are discovered, right? There's no consistent way. Every discoveries happen in all sorts of different ways, and every single time we think that we've figured out all the ways in which discoveries occur, somebody else comes along and discovers it in a completely different way. Albert Einstein was a perfect example of that. Prior to Einstein, everything was being discovered via experiments.
hmm
And experiments would come first, and then you'd ask questions, and experiments were mainly the like the center point of how to develop new theory. And then Albert Einstein comes in with no experiment and starts thinking about light and how light is produced, and Maxwell's theory of electricity and magnetism, and with just pure thought experiments, uh, comes to understand the physical world in a way that's new and more insightful and correct, without actual experiments. And then the experiments happen, and these things have been verified. Relativity, special relativity has been verified. General relativity has been verified. These are Einstein's contributions. Well, two of many, but those are the two, let's say, famous ones: special relativity and general relativity, which involved just thought experiments, and then from pure thought and mathematics, coming to conclusions which accurately describe things that can be observed experimentally.
And
It's incredible.
what's general relativity and special relativity
Yeah,
in layman's terms?
in layman's terms. Well, I mean, special relativity is essentially the description of how objects uh, interact with one another relative to their motion in space and time. So, so really, the way we think about things in the universe we're living in now, or not the way we perceive things in as human beings, is things are moving, but they're moving at very, very slow rates. We're not moving even nearly close to the maximum, the speed limit of things in the universe, how fast they can move. The speed limit is the speed of light. The speed of light is the fastest. Uh, uh,
Has that not been broken though?
no,
I thought that I thought I read something about they broke it, or they were planning to break it with something. I can't remember.
no,
No.
It's not. No,
Is it possible?
I'm gonna say no. I mean, this is one of those where, if it's possible, now we're getting into a totally different realm where physics is just wrong, or maybe not wrong, but just we would have to throw away everything we understand. If it is possible, it would be the same as 4 = 5.
But for example, Michio, do you know Michio Kaku?
Yeah,
So Michio Kaku, he has this theory where he talks about he's very big into spacefaring and potential other civilizations, like alien civilizations, and he has this theory about the three levels of um, what a civilization would be.
yeah. Type
And
0, type 1, type 2.
type one, yeah,
Yeah.
So we type one, type two, type three, and type zero, I suppose. But so type
We're currently type 0.
wait, I've caught. Well, I think he said we're type 0.7.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. So I think it was 0.7. So type 1 would be able to harness the power of your planet and to control the weather and everything on your own planet. And um, I think that was type 1, and able to travel in space. Type 2 was then to be able to harness the energy of like a star or the sun or something like that. And then type 3 was to be able to harness the energy of quarks. And he said that quark energy is enough to, like, some huge calculation, but it's like a ridiculous amount of energy, which could then be used for bending space and time, and like long distance space travel and all these other crazy things, and basically being able to manipulate time and space. And so he reckons, I think, that within 1,000 years we would be type 1, 10,000 we would be type 2, and 100,000 would be type 3, or something like along those lines. I've butchered that a little bit, but
Mm.
the reason I'm saying that is about, and I've heard it from various different scientists, the concept of bending space and time, and instead of traveling straight like that, being able to bend space and time and travel across.
Yeah, but that doesn't involve traveling faster than the speed of light.
True.
So, yeah, you could have geometries of space-time that allow you to move from point A to point B in a way that's much faster than if you were to go some longer distance, some longer route. But yeah, it's inherent to space-time itself and objects that have mass that they cannot move faster than the speed of light. And things that don't have mass, particles that are massless, they move at the speed of light, and nothing moves faster.
But what about it? What has this been studied in terms of, in if space and time were bent in that situation?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Has it been, it has, so that sort of thing's been studied?
The speed of light is not going to be violated based on the bending of space-time.
Okay.
Everything. This is there's this principle. It's the principle of causality. So basically, nothing can move outside of a certain range of speeds. Nothing can move past this speed limit, and that speed limit exists geometrically in the space-time itself. And yeah, you can warp that geometry, but the speed limit is going to be there regardless. There are many fancy ways we can start talking about this, but I don't think it's uh, of value. The point is that yeah, this speed limit in the theory that we understand today is going to just be there always. If something can travel faster than the speed of light, then we have to throw away basically uh, everything we understand. Yeah, that's just how it is right now. And personally, my personal opinion is that there's nothing wrong with having a speed limit. You
No,
know,
nothing at all
there's
wrong with
nothing
it.
wrong. And you know, once again, it could be that we are in some kind of matrix and the evil
Mm.
genius is tricking us and 4 equals 5, but then we're getting into a completely different kind of philosophy that has now exited the realm of science. Once again, we have starting points, and based on the starting points that we have today, nothing will travel faster than the speed of light. And you asked me what special relativity and general relativity was. I mean, special relativity is really taking Maxwell's theory of electricity and magnetism and adding in a few postulates saying nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, and the speed of light is going to be constant regardless of how that light is generated. And then physical consequences follow. That special relativity came out. Einstein published his papers on that in 1905. And then general relativity is taking that and adding in gravity into the mix. And that was, well, he famously presented general relativity to the world in 1915, and it continued to be developed for decades. And the last verification of one of the things that Einstein predicted in general relativity, which is the existence of gravitational waves, which are the actual uh, fluctuation of space and time itself propagating through the universe. This is a prediction of Einstein's theory of general relativity. This prediction was recently and famously confirmed experimentally. Uh, what year
Wow.
was it? I want to say 2016, maybe. And Nobel Prize was three Nobel Prizes were given. Um, yeah, over 100 years, about 100 years after uh, general relativity was born. So it took 100 years plus to verify experimentally what Einstein just, and colleagues, mostly Einstein, just thought, is sitting down and thinking about stuff. And that was a completely new way to discover things, right? Before, that's not how things were discovered. And it's really been one of the only times in history that things about the universe have been discovered in that way. Typically, experiments are very much at the center, but in that case, they were thought experiments, and it's really very fascinating how that could happen, right? Like it's just is very interesting.
So when you say that it was verified with experiment, do you mean like a physical experiment?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. These gravitational waves were detected. There was a collision of black holes, supermassive black holes, far away from us, very far away from us, and that caused an immense amount of energy to be released in the form of gravitational waves. That those waves reached us, and us human beings, I was not part of this, but as a species, we had an experiment that was able to detect the actual fluctuation of space and time, right? Um,
So
very
does that
interesting.
does that because what are your thoughts on anti-gravity machines, i.e. the typical
Like the
UFO
yeah.
um like propulsion device I
Yeah,
should say.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't see why those things can't exist. I'm sure they in principle could. It's just that I would have zero idea. We would, I think, just have zero idea of how they would work. But in principle, they could exist. Yeah, I would say. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah,
Have you seen the videos, which I think is very odd, but like have you seen the UFO videos released by the Pentagon?
yeah,
What are your
yeah.
thoughts?
Fascinating, compelling.
Do you
Uh,
think it's more likely to be UF as in
Aliens.
extraterrestrial, or do you
Yeah.
reckon it's more likely to be something that's built on this Earth that's like a super secret project?
Yeah, you got me cornered here.
Or there could be
Yeah,
there
I'm
could be
gonna
those.
go.
I've given you two options there. That's a
Yeah,
bit leading,
yeah,
but
no, but I'm gonna go with alien. I mean, if you put a gun to my head, but the reason why is if it was some sort of secret technology, which I'm sure, obviously there is secret technology that's very much the case. That would be an incredible discrepancy between what we understand uh, about the universe publicly and what we understand about the universe privately, let's say in some government run labs. And yeah, I think there's just far too many good scientists in the public sort of science practice that would just
be pissed off that they've been left out.
no, not be no, not that. That's not what I
No,
what I mean at all. I mean also yes.
why have you not fucking told me?
So how could you?
How could you
How
create
could you
this propulsion device without me?
spaceships?
And I'm
I
here
would be
working.
one of them.
I'm here working on a fucking 2-cylinder V8. Or no, that's wrong. Like a
Yeah.
V8 engine, and you've got a propulsion
Fucking
anti-gravity
gravity.
propulsion machine.
I would be very pissed myself personally if I was left. I would walk in and be like, "How fucking spaceships? Really? This is what you kept from me?" Yeah, no, I would be very pissed personally myself. No, I don't. I think that it's just impossible that, well, not impossible, but it's very unlikely that scientists would just be completely oblivious and then only a small few would be let in on the secret. I mean, because we're talking about things that are just far too fundamental to. Who knows? I might be wrong, but if I gun to my head, aliens.
But that brings me to my next question, though. I've got a few things to say here. Why, for what benefit would the... Oh, no, in fact, I've got a few answers to my own question here. I was going to say, why would the Pentagon release videos of this type of thing? Like, for what purpose? And originally, I've just answered my own question, but originally I was thinking that they were doing it to create fear in order to then be able to put in more strict measures, as is often done when it comes to some sort of external threat. You know, they drip feed a bit of information. Okay, these got these flying drones, and then they're like, okay, maybe there's an alien attack coming. We need to up our security, blah blah blah, and then you have more security that way. But then part of me thinks, okay, maybe they are genuinely putting it out there so that then it plants a seed in people's head to think that that is possible, and then hope that someone comes back to them and says, okay, maybe this is possible because of this. You know, you're kind of like crowdsourcing the answer. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to guess, the Pentagon isn't putting out these types of things to shape public opinion, really. If I had to guess, I mean, I realize a lot of people, a lot of the world sees, the Pentagon and these government, you know, organizations, agencies, the CIA, as these super mysterious, and they are mysterious in many ways. They have many secrets, but I think they see them more mysterious than what they really are. The job of the Pentagon is to fund the military, right, and properly it's a place where interaction between Washington D.C. and top level military officials interact and decide what needs funding, what doesn't, what programs need to be created, and so on and so forth. And I think that the function of the military is really very specific, and shaping public opinion would be something that would come from somewhere else. That comes from higher up. That comes from who knows? I mean, in the case of the U.S., really, the executive branch is very responsible for leading the nation in terms of public opinion and that sort of thing. Uh, you know, so yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't speculate in that direction personally. I understand and I respect when people might think, perhaps the Pentagon has like a small group of people that are thinking, how are we going to trick the public
But I don't
next?
think I don't. That's what I mean. I don't necessarily think of it in like nefarious motives, but it's like there is a motive. there's always a motive for doing
the
for releasing something like that, which is
right.
going to shape public opinion.
Yeah.
Fact, that's going to change that's going to ruffle a lot of people's feathers.
Yeah.
There's a motive for that. Otherwise, they
Yeah.
would just keep that. They don't have to tell anyone anything, but there's a reason for that. Probably,
Absolutely.
but that's my point. It's like, is it in terms of what you're saying? Like maybe it's not come from higher up, and that's actually a military decision. And if you're right in saying that, then maybe it is to try and crowdsource answers. Maybe they are genuinely flummoxed, and they're putting it out there. Like, we've
That
seen
might
these
be part of it.
things. Like,
Well,
what the hell are these? Does anybody have any sort of idea what this is? That kind of came to me as uh, probably that I'm thinking that now that's I would say the strongest argument I can think of, the most likely I would say. Um, but I don't know.
yeah,
It's very confusing.
there are certainly reasons why things get released to the public. And yeah, I wasn't giving my speculation on
Hmm.
what the reason is. I was at that point just now pointing out that I don't think the reasons would be, to, let's say, prime people for something, or, I think now I'll tell you what I think might be part of, the nature of the reasons for releasing such information. Yeah, I think firstly, I think the question to be asked is, why would they hide certain things, right? Why would you keep certain things secret? And I think that the answer to that question is probably very much within our reach. You and I
Mm.
here sitting here, right? Some things are flying over our airspace, and we don't know what it is, and we don't want the enemy to know that there are things flying over our airspace that we don't know about.
But we also don't want people to panic unnecessarily.
Yeah, but then again, that sort of public opinion thing, I don't think the military is really so much making that decision on. That's again, I think that's more of a politics that makes that sort of decision. The military is concerned with national security and
Protection of
and,
the
and
public,
fight and
though.
yeah, I think we're going to disagree on this one. I don't think the military is thinking about public opinion. I think that people high up in the military do consider public opinion. I'm not saying that the military ignores public opinion, but I'm saying the decisions on protecting or shaping public opinion, I don't think those decisions are being made by people in the military. I'm set.
But for example, say if there was weird things flying over the sky that you
Yeah,
don't know what they are,
yeah,
um, you release that information out and make that information public,
right.
people are going to panic, and that could then lead to a military
But that's
problem.
not an argument for the military being the ones that make the decision to keep something secret, right? Like that's true. That people might panic, right? But that's not a statement that directly leads to the conclusion that it must be the military that's making the decision to keep this away from the public, right? It could be somebody else. It could be the executive branch, right? The After all, the military obeys orders to the president of the United States, right? And the Secretary of State and the people who are in the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they are following orders. The the military is responding to a civilian sector, and that civilian sector is the government, and these are elected officials, right? And those are the ones that make those decisions. Now, keeping something from the public, other than let's say keeping things from going into chaos in terms of people panicking. I think in terms of the military's advice or interests in keeping certain things private has to do with national security. Again, I'm guessing I'm not a 4-star military general, that served in a bunch of different wars. I don't. This is me being just a total layman and speculating based on what I observe as a citizen of the world. Um, yeah, I think the military is probably just concerned with more of the national security element of that. And again, when these decisions are made, typically my understanding is that, you know, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which are generals and admirals, go to the president and advise the president, advise the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State advises the president, and then the president makes decisions based on that advice. And typically I think the interest of the military is, again, to maintain national security, to maintain interests that are going to protect, the people who are, protected by that military, right? People paying taxes to keep themselves protected from adversaries that may want to cause harm, and so on. But in that light, the officers that go and advise the president are, probably making their statements and based on that. And then the president might decide, and other people, I don't know exactly how such public opinion decisions are made, but, let's say the executive branch and then Congress, in some cases, I'm not sure, but let's say the president makes that decision based partially on the advice of the high-level officers in the military, partially based on what the Secretary of State thinks, what the Secretary of Defense thinks. I think I've been using the term Secretary of State, and I've been meaning Secretary of Defense. Yeah. And so on, right? Yeah, why? So I feel like I still haven't said why I think such information about UFOs would be released. I think the first question was why they would keep it. The reason would be national security. And now they're realizing, okay, well, you know what? Maybe it's not such a huge national security risk to let it be known that we don't know about certain things that are out there. And a good way to start figuring out what it is might be to release some of this information little by little and see who might start getting interested in answering such questions. I'm speculating. I might be totally wrong. It might be completely the Illuminati, concealing everything, making sure that we're kept dumb as a population. It totally might be. I don't know. I think not.
I think that a lot of things are kept from us for very good reasons because we don't need to know. And that's the thing. It's a need to know basis. But that's why I find it odd in this situation because with these sort of high level decisions and sort of especially high level military decisions and military developments and new technologies and all this stuff, like we don't need to know that. Again, for national safety, whichever nation it is, they don't want to be telling everybody they're creating new things or they've got new weird people visiting them or whatever like that. They keep that, they want to keep that secret, and that's totally fair enough. And like I think that sometimes we obviously have conspiracies and things like the Illuminati exist and billionaires talk to each other and go to meetings and have meetings with other billionaires, which they do, which is also fine,
and meet with government
because
officials.
And meet with government officials, and it's like, but it's kind of like we go meet with people who are our peers. It's like if you're also billionaires and your peers are also billionaires. I was talking about it with someone recently. It's like if you're a billionaire, you can only really hang around with other billionaires because no one else is really going to have the slightest idea of what it's like to live in your shoes.
And you can't trust people, I think.
You can't trust anyone. Even like if you become a millionaire, really, you have to kind of change most of your social group because everybody else is going to, not everyone, but a lot of people will change how they act towards you and view you as a source of, if not money, then opportunity. So it's like it becomes very different.
People might have envy and resentment.
Exactly, and you don't want to be around people that are feeling those things towards you and effectively being fake. So I totally get it, and it's like people that have made it as billionaires, maybe they are still ordinary people, and they are allowed to go and meet with other people, but they probably are shaping public policy.
Oh, for sure.
Because they are the ones who have the biggest vested interest in things, and it makes logical sense. Does it make moral sense? I don't know. But
I mean,
going back to this point of having stuff hidden and being used to having stuff hidden and being okay with that, then to have something that seems like extremely out there, the type of thing that would be hidden, not hidden, then it's just kind of it makes me curious. Like I used to want to be an MI6, which is like maybe
Those
you know,
badass
yeah,
secret agents.
secret agents. Like the for anyone who doesn't know, it's like the British version of the CIA, but only they deal with foreign matters. So MI5 is like internal, MI6 is external.
CIA is external as well.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, and the FBI is internal.
Yeah, FBI is part of law enforcement, and the CIA is an intelligence agency. That basic intelligence means spy
Ah,
agency,
um,
among other things. Yeah, but
so I used to want to be part of that, and then like this is when I was probably 14, 15, and I was into languages. So the plan was to like go to uni and learn a few different languages, like Farsi and Arabic and stuff,
dude,
which would be pretty cool. Like I am learning Arabic
did
now,
you learn
but
any Farsi?
I didn't learn any Farsi. I didn't go. I didn't do it in the end. But
Okay,
like I do. I'm learning Arabic at the moment, and I speak a few other languages.
awesome.
But um, anyway, then I realized, wait a minute, if I'm a spy, I'm not
Yeah,
gonna be able to tell anyone I'm a spy. I'm gonna have to basically lie to everyone that I meet about what I
it's gotta
do.
be a very hard life.
It's gonna be an extremely hard
It's got
life,
to be.
and you would have really no reward for anything that you do. Your reward would have to all be intrinsic.
I've heard about this from a someone who would recruit agents for the CIA, saying that their best agents are the ones that their reward is completely intrinsic,
Yeah,
individual, and they'll have gargantuan egos, but it's kept to themselves.
yeah. Because they
Because
don't
that's how
need
you
to.
can
They don't
do.
need to tell anyone else.
Right.
Like one of my friends at school, I don't know if it was an internship or if it was after school. I can't remember, but he did some sort of work placement at the Ministry of Defence in the UK. Couldn't tell anyone about it. Like I can't remember if he could tell us that he was working there when
Yeah.
he was doing it, or if he had to tell us afterwards. But you can't tell anyone what you were doing when you're there,
Right.
and it's like part of I would describe myself as mildly social, but for someone who has some desire for sociability, to not be able to talk about anything you do in work, or even further than
Well,
that,
you would have a
lie.
group within the community, probably, hopefully, to some extent.
True, but then probably you're not allowed to tell each other the things that you're specifically working on. Because again, it's one of those need to
Sometimes.
know basis. Maybe like your
I don't
like
know.
direct team, however many people that is. But what if you're like an undercover sole
Well,
agent somewhere?
there's different levels. I don't know. We're once again speculating, but there's different levels of like classified that they
Yeah,
call, right? So, certain people have a certain clearance to get certain kinds of information, and then there's different levels, and then those levels might grant you access to more information, and then there's someone who's able to look at everything, and someone who's not, and yeah, I don't know what levels of classified these super James Bond secret agents in the MI6 or CIA are able to have, and whether or not that means that they can read their colleagues' debriefs on certain operations. I think that they do read debriefs because you learn from one another operationally.
true.
I don't know. I would have to ask friends that know. Not that I have any. I might.
Oh, I
Uh,
might or I might
I might
not.
not. I might be one of. No, I'm just not. I'm definitely not. Um, who knows? But I would imagine that. Um, yeah. If you're doing that kind of work, um, yeah, I think having that social balance is not one of your main
No.
objectives in life, and and you would probably have some degree of social balance, not the kind that most people crave, desire, and seek.
Have
But he
you
would have some, I think.
I've two of my friends. I just saw him like a month ago. So there's like one of my friends at home. He works for some sort of fraud, like anti-fraud department now, in the UK, and he's being given some level of clearance, like
Yeah,
not some. Do you know what I mean? Clearance to look into people's. I suppose it is looking into people's life, like to check if they're doing fraud. So he's been given some level of clearance, or he's like going through the application for it, and he's had to basically nominate one of my other friends as his like reference or whatever. So then these people are going to be grilling my other friend about this friend, and he said he said it's
damn.
stuff like what type of porn does he watch, like how
Oh,
much does he
jeez.
drink, like just everything
This is very personal.
yeah, extremely personal stuff. But then it's
I'm
also
not
like,
trying to share that kind of stuff with people.
yeah, but that's what they're trying to like, I suppose, see if there's anything you can be blackmailed about,
Ah,
anything.
I see.
I guess that's one of the reasons. Also, just to see what type of person you are, and I suppose they're also probably maybe they have access to all your information anyway, and they want to see if you're
Yeah,
lying.
yeah.
So maybe they'll say like, "What type of porn do you watch?" You're like,
The
"Oh,
government can
just
see what kind
just
of porn you watch,
just like
for sure.
vanilla stuff." They're like, "Not no what I can tell."
I don't know. I don't think people watch vanilla porn. I wonder what the actual data is on this. Like how many of porn watchers watch only vanilla porn? My guess is 0%.
Yeah,
If I had to guess, once again, all of this is guessing.
yeah.
But
But then I suppose it's one of those things where it's like, if you're bombarded with loads of things, you're
yeah.
gonna click on them. Like that's it.
Also, there's like the dopamine kick that
Yeah,
you get from certain activities. If you do them enough, then you're not getting the same kind of
yeah.
response, and so you want to get a similar response. And that's the whole thing about addiction, right? And then your baseline dopamine levels just are getting depleted, or are going to be depleted, and so yeah, you're just increasingly dissatisfied with things that in the past were satisfying. I mean, this is pretty well understood, I think, in the world of neuroscience and brain chemistry and biology.
Hmm.
So I would imagine that with porn, we've all watched porn. Come on,
Hmm.
we've all experienced
Yeah,
things where.
my friend told me about porn, and
Yeah,
based on what
my
he's telling
friend
me,
says that he used to watch vanilla porn, and after 3 days was like, yeah, now I have to watch crazy porn. Yeah, I think it's just a natural thing, right? With alcohol, I've experienced it, right? I remember the first time I felt under the influence of alcohol was with 2 beers.
mm,
Like 2 beers do nothing to me now, right? And I'm not a heavy drink. I don't go out and get drunk all the time. I don't particularly enjoy being drunk.
mm,
I just built a tolerance from social gatherings, going and drinking with friends and stuff, and I enjoy alcohol, but I don't enjoy being super drunk. However, my tolerance is so high now that 2 beers is not. I can go work out after two. I'm not going to get as good of a workout, but I could, in theory, go work out with 2 beers and I'll be fine. You
mm.
know. Uh, so yeah, I mean, how do we get to this topic? Being investigated by a fraud
Oh yeah,
agency
being
and
invested by fraud agents. Now we're
yeah,
talking about dopamine curve. But quickly back to spies. Have
yeah.
you read or listened about Jack Barsky, the
N-
KGB spy?
No, I have not.
Oh, really cool story. He's got a book and he's on various podcasts.
I'm gonna make sure
Um,
you get this to me. By the way, the information,
yeah.
please.
I'll try and post everything as well. The things I mentioned. But so he was recruited when he was in college, like when he was about 20. He was living in East Germany. He was living in East or West Germany. I can't remember which. And he got recruited by the KGB to go and spy on the other side of Germany. Um, no, he must have been in East Germany because that's the communist side. But anyway,
Well, they
so
well they would go into the West and spy, and vice versa,
yeah. So he basically, and he got
which
recruited, and
is
he tells
crazy.
about the recruitment story, um, of him basically like meeting this guy, and it went on for like a year. And he was given all these little tasks where he'd have to go up to someone's door and basically try and extract a load of information from a random person. Like pretend he was a student looking for information and basically like get all of their details about like everything they do and their marital status and all like a load
Right.
of stuff like that. And then like learn how to tail people, learn how to like lose a tail, like someone
I'm
following you,
getting so
not a
excited
physical
listening
tail.
to this stuff.
It was actually really cool.
Why is it that this is so cool to us, especially as
I
guys?
don't know. I don't know. It's
It's
so
so
weird, isn't
cool,
it?
and
And
I get obsessed with this shit.
it
Like
is very cool.
I've been recently obsessed with learning tactics for close quarters combat. Just like all the different things. And I happen to have a buddy that knows a lot about this stuff because he works in that line of work. And I have so many questions for him, and I'm almost embarrassed to call him up and be like, "Yo, dude, When I and I have a whole list of questions. It's freaking fascinating. I think as boys, we just want to go and
Be a
play
spy.
play with guns. I did grow up shooting here and there. You know,
Mm.
yeah, it's so much fun.
When we were like around the time when I wanted to be an MI6, um, they it was the time when we had to do work experience at school. Like we have to do 2 weeks of work experience when we're like 15. Um, and someone in my school, they arranged for these tactical firearms unit, and that's the like English version of the SWAT team. So these two people from the tactical firearms unit, they came in to give a talk to the people in the class in the year below me, and I had to like shadow them for a day. So I was like just taking them around and making them tea and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and they said to me, they were both like, "Look, we get paid £50,000 a year to drive fast cars and play with guns." And that was like these two like 40-year-old, pretty well esteemed tactical firearms unit people. And they literally
Yeah.
said in pretty much those exact words that to a little 15-year-old boy. And I was like, that does sound pretty cool. I didn't end up going down that path, but it was very exciting. There's another podcast it's just reminding me of that you're probably also like. It's called The Tunnel, and it's about these. I think they were students that tunneled from east to west Berlin
Mm.
um, during the conflict, and it's just them like how they tunneled literally under from one sort of. I think it was from one something to a factory anyway, but they're just these random students who had a bit of a revolutionary streak within them and decided to risk their lives tunneling. Meanwhile, there are other people tunneling around you and people searching for people that are tunneling.
Oh,
And you might come
Jesus.
into some sort of landmine or all these things. But just the thought of tunneling, literally digging a tunnel under the
Yeah.
ground
Yeah.
into enemy quote unquote
Yeah.
lines, and
Yeah.
then just having to like wander around and pretend like you're not from there and try and deliver a
It's
package or
craziness.
something like that. It's
It's
like, oh my
craziness.
god, and like that's not
And you
even
could
that
go to
long ago.
prison forever, be executed. The
Yeah,
consequences are the ultimate
the ultimate
consequences.
consequence, and these people are like 20,
Yeah.
21 and
I love
doing
it.
that.
Well, special operations units in the military, a lot of these dudes are 21, 22, 20 that go on deployment and do some of the craziest things. These are young dudes, extremely fit, competitive, like alpha type personalities, leaders. A lot of obviously there's a little bit of everything I'm guessing, but just putting all that together, right? You get a bunch of dudes that are all highly motivated to go do something, and you teach them to a high level of expertise, and then you go put them in an environment where they can go operate. I mean, Jesus, it's like it's incredible. I think that's why it's so fascinating, right? Is just the level of expertise and the personality types, and then well, we like to think that it's also to accomplish good, and I think for the most part, personally, I believe that it is. I mean, maybe you have some CIA operatives doing stuff that is fucked up, but
I think there is plenty of fucked up stuff, but it can always I think that the problem is when it comes down to morality is that everybody thinks they're right about everything. So one person's morals, like if you take emotion out of it and you just do something based on logic, like it's that classic conundrum of if I do this, 10 people will die, but if I don't, 1,000 people will die. Therefore, anything I
right,
do with these 10 people, 100% justified because I'm still effectively saving lives, but maybe I have to torture these 10 people to death to save 1,000 people. Like that's an extreme example, obviously, but it's like those little situations. But there's like a lot of things that I mean, all governments have done, but one thing really sticks in my mind is these experiments that were done in the US in about the 1950s, somewhere around that.
MK Ultra.
Well, MK Ultra is one of
Oh,
them,
okay.
but I would say that that's even less controversial. Um, but this was an experiment done with syphilis. What they did was they went to an area which was a fairly depraved area full of mainly African Americans, like really low income,
Yeah.
and like most of them were kind of illiterate and all these type of things. Like they
Yeah.
picked a specific area,
Yeah.
and what they did was they said, "Okay, we're going to inject you with syphilis, and
That's horrible.
it's you can then come to us for treatment for everything, and we'll treat you for the rest of your lives. We'll give you medical for the rest of your lives. And I imagine they gave them some sort of money as well. But they said syphilis is incurable.
Yeah.
So you'll have it for life, but we'll give you a good life, basically, and we'll treat you. You'll be fine. So then they gave syphilis to all these people, and then they were treating them. And then one of them ended up going outside their little area where they lived, and they, had some sort of illness, and they went to another doctor. And the doctor was like, "Oh, you've got syphilis." They were like, "Yeah, I know, it's incurable. These people are treating me." They're like, "No, it's not incurable. Like, we can give you penicillin, it'll get rid of it." And they're like, then it kind of like unwound this whole experiment, and they'd basically been giving people syphilis to then study the effects of syphilis up to death, because syphilis,
Yeah, that's
if
fucked
left
up.
untreated, will kill people. And this is going on at the same time, or around the same time, as the whole post-war Nazi trial whole situation was happening, and you have
Yeah.
government being like, shame on you, and they're doing the same type of experiments that the Nazi war criminals, convicted war criminals were doing
Or similar at times. Yeah.
on on prisoners. Obviously, they weren't just like gassing and murdering loads of them, but they were still
Right.
experimenting, and it's like, it's crazy.
Oh, by no means am I denying that the governments of the Western world, of our Western democracies, have done unethical things to its people and to the people of foreign nations. I do not deny that one bit. Uh,
But my
but
point,
yeah,
my point, sorry to cut in. My point there was that obviously then, if you justify that by saying, okay, we're going to give 50 people syphilis, but then we will pretty well understand the effects of syphilis, and that will save 50,000 people in the future.
right,
It's like, with pure logic,
right,
you can justify that. And I think that that's where morality comes into it, because it's like, I was talking about this with someone recently, that as you move up the hierarchy of power
right,
in a lot of different fields, like the ones that are obviously often quoted is politicians and medical professionals. As you move up the hierarchy of power there,
right,
and lawyers as well, it increases the chances of sociopathic tendencies,
right.
lack of emotion, um, which, in order to get shit done like that, to do those crazy experiments, that's fine, but there's no emotion in there. And if you don't have that emotional connection, like, what about these 50 people that are going to suffer? And
Well,
what about their families and all this? It's like,
I
oh,
I
it gets
hear
this
you.
conundrum. It's like,
No, I hear you, but I think there's checks and balances. Number one, and number two, I think that there's an entire culture behind, you know, military doctrine that deals with, how to conduct intelligence operations, how to gather intelligence from people who are imprisoned and so on. And I'm not saying that people within these agencies and entities don't go outside of those lines, out of those guidelines, but I do think they exist, and I do think the doctrine exists. And I mean, if you were to read military doctrine of the United States military, or of the military of the UK, right? Uh, I think you would see that it's very well written doctrine, and it's humane within the uh, boundaries of how humane war can be, which is it's never going to be humane. This is another thing, right? You know, you're mentioning morality, and we should strive as a responsible society and as a species to have moral standards, but there are things that are going to occur where lines are going to get blurred, and in
mm,
the case of war, lines are blurred. And yeah, you got to make, the people who are in those situations make decisions in the midst of blurred moral lines. And then there are some things that are going to be very clear, right? I mean, you have, some of these famous, terrorists, let's say, skinning people alive on the streets in Iraq, post fall of Saddam Hussein, or you might have, ISIS, setting people, journalists, innocent journalists on fire. Those things are very clear. Okay, these guys need to be, um,
turn it down a notch.
yeah, yeah. You need to fight these people because it's clearly something that needs to be fought. And that's the unfortunate truth of the world and of the species, of our species. We're animals. This is an
Mm.
animal. We are part of the animal kingdom, and unfortunately, today we're not some super evolved species where now we can just based on morals and ethics and philosophy, just orient the world in a way that's beautiful for everyone. We're not at that stage.
Yeah.
We're still animals, and there's still impulsive people, who grew up in unfortunate circumstances, indoctrinated in a certain way. And then the question is, right, who has the right doctrine, who has the wrong one? And the thing is, uh, we're not going to be able to answer that fully, right? I mean, you and I can sit here and decide, you know what, killing people is wrong, and people who go around killing people need to be stopped. And if the only way to stop them is killing people, then maybe that's acceptable, right? Maybe you and I can come to that conclusion, but then a Buddhist monk would be completely against that, let's say perhaps, and then who's right, who's wrong. There's just different schools of thought, and yeah, I don't know if there is a right or wrong, really. It's a matter of uh, opinion, and we're a group of animals. I happen to be a believer that people who are doing wrong need to be stopped at all costs. Depending on what they're doing, especially if they're going out and harming people, innocent people. I think they need to be stopped. Uh, uh, and if that means taking their lives, I think morally I would be okay. I no, I don't think so. I'm certain. I think I'm absolutely certain that I'm okay with that. If you have a mass shooter, I'm not going to be thinking, is it ethical to kill this person personally? I would want someone to. Anyway, these are horrible things to think about. I
But I
don't.
think that
It brings down my energy level
does
because it's
that.
so horrible to. But at the same time, they are important things to discuss, and by no means do I think there's an objective standard here.
No,
This is just personal opinion, let's say.
this is something I've been struggling with over the past couple of years. Is this balance? Ev- I tend to fall between extremes of everything, and I
Okay.
tend to I tend to go against the mainstream and the flow because that is the side that interests me more because I think what's obvious is obvious and easily understood, but the other side of the argument, you learn more about the obvious argument. In my case, I learn more about the obvious argument by
Yeah.
studying the reverse argument of it. The far-fetched ideas, the out there ideas, but I tend to fall on two extremes and then eventually meet in the middle, which is kind of what I'm finding in different aspects of my life with different issues that I'm pondering. And one of these issues has been war. Like I used to be of the same opinion as you solidly for a long time. It's dog eat dog. It's if there's people out there that are causing damage and they are likely to cause damage to lots of people,
Right.
damage them. Like that, it's kill or be killed.
If that's the only way to
If
stop
that's
them.
the only way to stop it, and
Yeah.
it's kill or be killed, basically.
Right.
And I would have been of the opinion that it, death is not, in the grand scheme of things, the death of one person is not that. Um, it's it. How to put this without sounding like a turtle dick?
It's
Like
not that big a deal.
it's
We're all
it's not
gonna
that big
die.
a deal. Do you know what I mean? The death of
I
one
hear
person
you.
in terms of 8 billion people, even the death of 1,000 people in terms of the 8 billion global population.
Right.
Some people are born and their role in life is to die a soldier. That's their role. That's what they are born into. That's the path they go down,
Right.
and they will die a martyr. I've always been attracted to this. Not attracted, but yeah, I've had some attraction to this idea of martyrdom. And I came from reading the Bible when I was younger, and martyrs are revered always.
Absolutely.
And
They
there
made
there
the
is
ultimate. They made the
they made the
ultimate.
ultimate sacrifice.
We revere them in our societies, right?
Yeah,
The veterans that have made the ultimate sacrifice and given their lives to, defend our way of life.
and I think that the people that go into that sort of career, they also revere that, and maybe part of them wants to be like posthumously recognized and to have this legacy go down in history and to be one of these fallen heroes, and that's great and that's fine. But then I fell, and this coincided with me myself falling mentally unwell, um And then I started to fall of the opinion of, oh no, you can't hurt anyone. And I spent a while living as if that were true and experiencing that. No, we can't hurt anyone. We must like not hurt animals, not eat animals, not do
Right.
anything, avoid hurting anyone at all costs. Um, Not be in anyone else's country, interfering with them.
Right.
Leave everybody to sort their own stuff out and focus on, your own country and what you're doing. And I explored that side and a bit more of the Buddhist philosophy of just don't harm anything.
Right.
And
Don't
again,
step on a leaf.
don't step on
That's yeah.
don't step on a leaf, brush the ants out of the way. And
Yep.
I didn't get quite that extreme, but near enough that extreme,
Yeah.
of like literally not hurting a fly. And I remember
Right.
I was like, yeah, there was like a fly in the shower or something, and then it went under, and I felt so guilty because my shower had hurt that fly, and then I rescued it, and I was like trying to dry this little fly
Call a
with
plumber.
with a little piece of like toilet paper, and then I was trying to like blow it and wait for it to be able to fly off, and it did, and I felt satisfied. But then afterwards, I was like, "What are you doing, Connor? That was ridiculous!" Like, it is a fly, but then I did feel so guilty about it, and then now I've kind of swung a little bit back, and I'm like, I don't eat meat, um, and that's fine, but I don't necessarily think eating meat is wrong. Like I've made that choice for myself. I think that overconsumption of meat and mistreating animals is not a good thing, and that's unfortunately what happens in the majority of cases.
Yeah.
And that should be avoided. But the actual act of eating meat, I don't think is wrong. But then it's also brought me back to this. Now I've been doing a little bit more research and listening to things about war and understanding it and being like, okay, people, we think of people as in our own little bubble of people as that's fairly similar to us. Like, let's not hurt these people. But it's like you
Yeah.
kind of forget that some people are extremely messed up
Yeah.
in terms of what they will go to,
Right.
the lengths they will go to, and just their concept of how much a life is worth. And it was
Yes.
something I was listening to. I can't remember what it was, but it made the amazing point of, like in London we have a lot of stabbings. There's not a huge amount of shootings in America because as in America because guns aren't as accessible. But England
Yeah, you
is
can't have a gun as a citizen automatically, right? In England.
yeah, you can. You can get a gun if you want it for like hunting and stuff.
Yeah,
You
but
can't
it
get
has
or
to
you
be
can't.
through hunting. Or
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
you can't.
You can't get like an assault rifle. You
Well,
can
it
get
depends
like
on
a.
definition of assault rifle. But can I buy a pistol in England? I'm an English citizen, and I want to have a pistol at home, a Glock. Uh,
I think so. Yeah, I think you can go and get
really?
like a. I think you can get like a pistol license. You can definitely get shotguns
We
and
need.
rifles.
Sorry to interrupt. We need one of these people that looks up
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
for
yeah.
us. You got to go
But I'm
nearby.
pretty sure you can. Like, if you
I'm
can
kidding.
prove you've got a real reason for it,
Right.
and because people do like shooting, that is a thing. And if you can get a shotgun, I imagine you can get a pistol. And you can 100% get shotguns and rifles, for shooting, like hunting.
But
But it brought me back to you have London's got huge immigrant population, and you have different neighborhoods, as I suppose is in America, different neighborhoods where you'll have one Jewish neighborhood, one that's a neighborhood that's
yeah,
mainly Caribbean, one neighborhood which is mainly East African, and then you have people that come from different countries, all blended in the same cities, and each of those people has an idea of what violence is. So for an English person who is involved in gang life, maybe stabbing
yeah,
is the level of what you do, and maybe that person dies, but you're stabbing with a little small blade. Then you get someone come over from Somalia, and it's perfectly okay to hack people apart with
the machete.
machetes.
Yeah,
And like I
right.
even saw the videos in Barcelona in Raval in the middle of the day,
Yeah,
what looked like, I think they're Moroccan,
yeah,
because there was a lot of Moroccan people there, and I think it was
yeah.
a gang fight,
And there's
hacking at each other,
famously gangs,
and
Moroccan gangs in Raval,
yeah,
specifically, yeah, in
and
Barcelona.
so hacking at each other with machetes in the middle of the day in a small little street where
Damn.
regular people walk
When did this
past.
happen?
This would have been just pre-COVID, I think, or 3 years ago maybe. But I've seen more than one video of that happening, machete attacks in Barcelona.
Yeah.
in Raval, where I live.
Yeah.
You live in Raval? No, you live in
No,
Pobla,
I live in Gracia.
in Gracia, yeah. But then again, like to us, that's like what? Like machetes, but to them, that's what they do. That's how they settle their debts.
Yeah.
Like, that's how they settle their problem. And in some ways, like, is that better in terms of reducing public harm? Because they're not going to machete attack us. They're
Right.
machete attacking each other to solve
Right.
their debt. And at the end of the day, if these people involved in these gangs start macheting each other,
Right.
who cares? And
I hear you. I hear you.
there's that argument, but it just brings me down to like these people just they do not. And I saw, oh, this is
Well,
rough actually. My friend sent me a photo. I think it was like this series of videos in England that happened recently, and someone like pulls out a car, and then they start fighting. They were like hacking at each other with these like look like a mini scythe, and then the guy has like chopped half his like big chunk out of his leg, and then it shows the photo at the bottom of this a video of this guy tied up. Then they cut his ears off, and they say like someone's name, you're next, or something like that, and then the final photo is someone who's been totally cut apart, dead, and thrown in a ditch, and they've like their legs, head, and everything's been cut apart. And I was just thinking to myself, like, what? And apparently it was because this guy had killed someone else, then he was released on bail, and then they killed him, and then chopped him apart and threw him in a ditch. And I was just thinking, like, how, what goes through the person's head to be able to actually chop someone apart, throw him in a ditch? Like, that is some level of sadism
Yeah, for sure.
and revenge.
I
It's
think
crazy.
the idea that as a government can pass laws that will, let's say, eliminate violence is just totally wrong.
Mm,
We tend to think, oh, if we make knives illegal now, it won't be any more stabbings. I don't think these decisions should be made from the standpoint of let's just get rid of violence. Like, I think that's just a fallacy. I would love to sit here with you and think
mhm.
that we can design a society where the dude getting hacked and thrown in a ditch doesn't happen. We can pass the perfect laws that'll minimize it or whatever it is, um, or eliminate it altogether. But I don't think it's possible. I think violence will continue to exist.
What if, just had this thought, what if you have a place that's similar to the red light district in Amsterdam, where it's like legalized and
Hunger Games or no,
similar,
The
the
Purge.
purge, yeah,
Yeah,
like, an area or a dojo or something like that where people can go and
I don't think it's a good
settle their
idea. No, I
debts.
don't think it's a good idea. I think it should continue to be illegal, but I think we should also keep in mind I'm very much a believer that the government should keep its nose out of a lot of things. I think government should be minimal in many ways. Maybe I'm a bit of a libertarian or a bit of a more of America's version of conservative in that regard. That in the U.S., conservatives, roughly speaking, believe in the minimization of government, and government should just allow for a more lawless interaction between companies, right? The conservatives believe more in the free market,
Yeah, that's
for
the same in the
example.
UK.
And then the liberals are no, no, no. Let's go in and set up all these rules and make sure that all these rules are being enforced. And we're gonna force people to pay X amount of tax, and then with that tax, we have to do all these things. And I'm liberal in some ways. I'm conservative in other ways. But when it comes to this kind of thing, because you're not going to eliminate violence, I'm a bit more of the conservative type where I say, you know what, just don't don't
Don't
try
shit
to
where you eat.
restrict. Yeah, don't try to restrict people so much. That's my opinion. I think that we could have a debate on this. Any two people could sit down and have a debate on this for hours. Um, it's just a personal thought of mine, and uh, yeah, it's just it's unfortunate that there is violence, but I think there will continue to be violence, and then the question is, what do we do about it? And especially in places where police will show up in minutes when your life depends on seconds, right?
Mm,
In a active shooter scenario, minutes are way too long to wait for untrained police. Unfortunately, untrained police to show up and come and not take down the shooter. It's just not as I mean, we're going into specifics now, which is very easily can easily throw us into pondering what solutions are to such horrific scenarios. But uh, you know, I think the solution comes from a society as a whole. It's a cultural solution of people stepping up and being able to themselves be empowered and protect themselves from such things. Unfortunately, we have nuclear weapons in the world. We have guns in the world. We have swords in the world, machetes, and we have violence in the world. That's unfortunate. It's saddening, but it's the reality, and we have to live within that reality. And we can sit here and try to figure out which way is best to live within that reality, but we're not going to get rid of that reality. And I think that a lot of people from a wishful thinking standpoint think, if we ban guns, there won't be any more gun violence. And the data, at least in the US, suggests that that's probably actually the exact opposite. If you ban guns in the US, there's probably going to be more violence, right? It's just totally counterintuitive.
I
Uh,
don't know about
we
that.
we
I don't know. I don't know. Because
I
it's
mean,
like we
I've studied, looked into this a lot, and I think we can do another episode on on that, because it's very complex. But certainly, there's data on these kinds of things, and it's very compelling. And once again, sitting and debating, it requires a bit of study.
But do you know how many mass shootings the UK has?
Right.
Zero.
Yeah, but
Most countries have zero mass
now we're going
shootings.
into the debate, folks. Yeah. Right, but mass shootings isn't the thing that is at the nearly as it's not the thing that makes up most of gun violence in the US, not even close, right? So
Yeah, but most
so
countries don't really have gun violence. Like
so
it's very minimal. Most like Western European countries
this
have
is
minimal.
we're going into a discussion, a rabbit hole, because this is always the argument that comes from my European friends. And the fact is that there's a lot of information there to be understood that I think is just generally not understood out here, because the problem doesn't exist out here
Yeah, that's true.
for reasons that are I think mainly historic. Um, but the point is that the solution's not as easy as a lot of my beloved friends, you included,
Oh, I don't think it's
think it is.
easy. No, for
Well,
certainly
well,
now,
because
because you're in the situation now where you have them.
right, but
So it's like when you already have a shit ton of them
right,
and you ban them,
right, but
that doesn't really solve the problem. Whereas it's like in somewhere else, virtually, somewhere like the UK, regular people don't have guns. So it's like you could ban guns and it's only going to affect a tiny fraction of people, because the ones that do hunting and shooting, and they would probably still be allowed
the
to
the
have them.
the right to bear arms in the U.S. has nothing to do with hunting and shooting
No, I know.
recreationally.
But
It
I
has
thought
to
the
it has
whenever
to do with the balance of power. It has to do with the people being the ones that govern. That's the principle. And we can sit here and say, "Oh, it's an ancient principle. 200 the democracy has existed for 250 years or so, and it's time for things to change." And we can agree or disagree, but that's the reason, right? In Europe, the countries in Europe and Western Europe, we're talking about monarchies or dictatorships that had full grip on power and slightly released that grip, and people are now happy because that grip of power has been released to a certain extent, but it was never really and in a lot of these countries, a huge complete overthrow, like it was in the U.S., right? I mean, in the U.S., it was literally the people rising up against the monarchy that was there, and people defeating with the help of the French and defeating this, and the one of the basic principles was that people have to have the ability to govern themselves and defend themselves, and to this day, I do think it is relevant. It's relevant in a different way than it was 250 years ago. Uh, you'll see with dictatorships that turn into dictatorships in more modern times. With the Philippines, for example, this dictator in the 60s, I think it was, one of his first things when he came into power was, you have 10 days to turn in all your guns, and if you don't, you will be executed. And the ones that didn't were executed on the streets, right? That's the first thing you do if you want to have a total control of the population. in places like China, for example, where people are mass surveillance is horrific. You have the Uyghurs being experiencing genocide at the level of millions of people being in these re-education camps or whatever it
Mm.
is, which are work camps and sterilization camps. They enforce sterilization on women, which is one of the definitions of genocide by the standards of the United Nations. I think there's four different definitions of genocide by the standards of the United Nations. Some thing that they've all decided upon what is going to be called genocide. China's committing those,
Mm.
to and those kinds of things are the things that occur in populations where people don't have the right to bear arms. And in the case of Europe today, right, how it is today specifically, it's working quite well in the countries where people don't have that right to have their own weapons. But I think it's a metastable state. It's an unstable state, historically speaking. And maybe the UK will never be a dictatorship or monarchy again. Maybe Spain will never be a Franco-style dictatorship again. Uh, Probably not. Maybe not. Who knows? You never know. But the point is that um, the check and balance there is that the people are able to have that kind of power, to not let it ever happen. And the thing is that it does happen. It has happened historically where you have a peaceful, stable um, government that is ethically treating its people, and then that gets overthrown, and then you have a dictatorship, and now everybody's getting screwed left and right. And if they can't defend themselves, it's going to be like that permanently until somebody else from the outside comes in and does something about it. So yeah, I don't know. This is me being more of a libertarian in some ways, right? For me, it's like fuck off. If the police can have it, I should be able to have it. I'm paying the police anyway with my taxes. Uh, but
Yeah, but
again, we can debate it. We can
no, like
debate it forever.
whenever the right to bear arms things comes up, that I can't help but remember in Family Guy he says like, I wonder if we got this wrong. And then it's like when they're doing the Constitution, it's like, no, you have the right to hang bear
Bear
arms on the
arms.
wall, and that always makes
You
me
have the
laugh.
right to
But
bear arms.
like I get like what you're saying makes sense, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you because I don't claim to know anything about
Gotcha.
America or gun law or even the public sentiment over there towards it. I know that some people want it, some people don't. That's all I know basically. But obviously, just coming from a it's basically America is the only country really where guns are that popular. And it's like I understand what you're saying about they want to like make sure that they can't be like controlled by a dictatorship and a monarchy and all these different types of things. But um, ultimately, I don't think the public could probably put up an okay fight,
Yeah.
but the military's going to win because they can just come along and
Yeah,
blast you
that's
all to death. Like that's the thing. So it's like I don't. That's why I don't think it's necessarily that relevant now. And to be able to revolt back in the day, to have a gun instead of a pitchfork, would have been a huge advantage and would probably make you feel pretty empowered. Um, but now, I don't think that the argument is as relevant as it once was. But again, if it
uh,
keeps people happy, fine. Um, but then I suppose it's just one of those things that if everyone's got guns and they're easily accessible, then there's going to be gun violence, and that's
I'm
just
dying to interrupt you so much
yeah,
right now. May I?
yeah, of course, go.
Um, yeah, the thing about, the military can easily defeat the US population in a face-off. I don't think that's a good argument because the point is that if things get to that point of conflict, we're already fucked, right? Like that. The point is that it doesn't get to that point of conflict to begin with, and part of the way it doesn't is the fact that the current government knows that people can rise up, and right now that like
But do you
that.
think that's a genuine concern of the government?
I think it's always a genuine concern when you have a small group of people governing over a large group of people, that small group of people knows that they're not going to have it easy if they want to start doing things that are just inhumane to the large group of
But
people.
before being concerned about the public rising up, you'd want to be concerned about the military rising up.
Military will
like,
not. That's not. No. I like the way that the hierarchy of command works in military doctrine. I believe that it is virtually impossible for, let's say, the military to just go rogue and be like, no, we're just going to start committing mass atrocity. That's, we're touching up on so many things where we can just dive deep so hard. Military doctrine is incredibly extensive and complex and philosophical as well as practical. And, we can get into this. And I'm not an expert by any means, but, uh, the command structure itself exists for a reason, and it works very well. At least in the U.S. military. I'm obviously in the U.K. military, in the U.K. as well. Um, but yeah, the other one, I had another point that when I said I wanted to interrupt you, there's the fact that, okay, the military destroying a armed militia is easy. I don't think it's relevant for the reason I just said. That wouldn't get to that point of conflict because the government knows that it wouldn't go well from even right from the beginning, right? You wouldn't have a total control. I don't know. It's certainly
to
it doesn't make it impossible. It makes it far, far unlikely versus it being much more likely.
But to counter that,
if you don't give them
a
that
tyrannical leader,
Yeah.
I don't think a tyrannical leader
Yeah.
would be concerned about an uprising
Right.
when they have the military on their side. That's my opinion. That if there were a tyrannical leader that came in
Right.
and he wanted to just ultimate power,
Right.
maybe world domination, the type of leader it would need a new Hitler or a new Stalin that would have to come in to the US to then cause this level of discontent.
Which is why there are many checks and balances in the democracy, and the only one, the right to bear arms is not the only check and balance in the democracy.
Yeah, I
that
know,
is
but
the
what I'm
US.
saying is that I don't think like the argument of the the government keeps in check because they're concerned about the people have got arms and they are weapons, not and arms. But they've got two arms and weapons.
Some of them
So
don't have
there's
2 arms.
yeah, true. Actually,
But they have
sorry
arms.
to those people. Yeah, some people have no arms but weapons. But for the government to be concerned about an uprising because people have got weapons as opposed to not having weapons, I don't think that a tyrannical government would be their concern. I don't think that stepping out of don't think that they would not step out of line because they'd be like, oh god, people have got
Again,
weapons.
Several checks and balances, not just the one of people having guns, but people having guns would be part of the checks and balances. Because if you have if the democracy gets so fucked up that it gets completely overthrown by an authoritarian regime, you have bigger problems now, obviously. But even if that were to happen, let's say it's a domestic internal dictator, whoever it is, from within takes over total power, right? And this person is now directing, let's say, the police forces to go and execute anyone who's not following orders. Try going and sending police in Texas to go kill people who are not following the dictator's orders in Texas. Those people will not be forced to live under that tyranny unless you fucking kill them with missiles and so on. So again, part of the checks and balances. It's not right to bear arms is by no means the way that you prevent. The only way you prevent, or the main way you prevent a dictatorship. It's one of the ways that you empower the people to fight off tyranny.
I would say it makes more sense though from an external threat as opposed to internal threat of tyranny.
That also,
because it makes more sense if everyone's got weapons, and the army has
every
weapons.
single yard of land is protected by a machine gun.
Yeah, then it means that
right.
if another country wants to come in, it's like they've got to fight the army and like 200 million Americans and babies that have got weapons.
Also, I think the mass shooting thing is not so much right to bear arms issue as it is a mental health issue. Obviously, there are things that need to be done legislatively to prevent these things better. But I don't think taking away people's guns is the solution. Actually, I think freeing up people's ability to carry arms in public would be part of the solution. Again, we can debate this all day. But yeah, I think data suggests that first of all, if you were to confiscate, like let's take a magic wand and you're to confiscate all the legally owned weapons in the United States, just magically, I think mass shootings would continue. Because you have a bunch of illegally owned ones. Sure, they're hard to get, but people can get them. And not only that, um, but then you have the mass knives problem. Then you have other things. And then you're dealing with the fact that now you've eliminated that empowerment of the people. Uh, yeah, I think there's so much we can discuss. It's better if we do our homework because I don't have data right now. I don't have numbers, and but I have looked at
ultimately
them. I
those
have looked at
ultimately though the data about that is hypothetical data because it doesn't exist. Like
what?
it's hypothetical data because you can't you can't compare what the US would be like without weapons
No.
when
That's not what I mean by data. I'm talking about if you look at the occurrences of gun violence case by case,
yeah
and you
of
look at
how
the
many people.
patterns, you look at the patterns of these things, and from that you determine what kind of legislation would prevent mass shootings and what kind wouldn't. From there, you can start drawing conclusions. And in the past years, in the past, not recently, but maybe 5 years in the past, I really dove into this and looked into it. And I remember at the time concluding that, if you were to actually ban guns, it would actually not help at all. I would love to do my homework on this because now I'm speaking as a person that, doesn't have these opinions well formed on data anymore because I just forgotten a lot of this. Looked at it, for a few weeks. I remember studying this stuff in detail, but my point is that it's not as trivial as thinking, oh, the mass shootings is happening directly as a result of people having the right to having guns. Switzerland has more guns than people. People have guns in Switzerland, and they have how many homicides a year, like 10 or whatever it is. It's not many, right? So clearly Switzerland is doing something differently that works, and it has nothing to do with people not having guns. And that's just an example, right? And things are very different in different places. I mean, just geographically, the U.S. is a very different place than Switzerland. Famously, Switzerland has explosives on all of the bridges that go into Switzerland. They have no military, and that's their only form of defense. So that if they get invaded, they just blow up the bridges. So every time you drive into Switzerland over a bridge, somebody in the government can blow up that bridge.
That's pretty
Right?
cool.
Um,
Yeah, I just want to clarify.
yeah,
I'm not saying is that guns need to be banned in the US because that
fair
is
enough.
not possible. That's
But
you
if
can
it
part
were
you can
if
but
it were possible, you would think that would be the right move.
um I think that I don't know enough about the sentiment of the people to
No,
be able to
no. Not sentiment of. I'm talking pure pragmatic wise. Do you think that if it were possible to magically remove guns, regardless of consideration of sentiment of the people, would that eliminate mass shootings in the U.S.?
I would say that it would probably have a big impact on reducing them if you could magically
That that's where
because
we need to do homework.
because my point is that say you have someone that's got tendencies towards mass shootings. This person, for whatever reason, he decides he wants to mass shoot someone.
Yeah.
If you're in a country where you can't go and just buy a gun, you have to go through a lot more steps in order to be able to fulfill your fantasy, as opposed to just flipping one day, picking up
Personally,
your gun and
I'm not against putting in more steps. I think there needs to be gun reform in the U.S. 100%. I don't think that the laws that exist today are sufficient to minimize the threat of people who've decided to commit these evil acts of violence. 100% laws need to change, but I think we ought to be careful of what we think will be a solution and what we think will really minimize, because it's not intuitive and it's not obvious.
No, and that's why like I wouldn't I don't feel able to give a solution for it. It's just obviously coming from like in coming from Europe,
Yeah,
guns are just not on most people's minds. They're just not. Like I know one person who does shooting like professionally,
yeah,
but ultimately I've never seen or touched a real gun. And if you speak to most people,
right.
they'll tell you that.
Yeah,
And so unless you get involved in gang culture,
right,
in certain places where there are high gun crime in specific places,
right,
then guns are not a part of everyday life. Therefore, it's not something that you would reach for in a state of crisis. And if you don't
right,
have a gun readily available when you're going through a period of crisis,
right.
then logically, pragmatically to me, that will reduce the amount of, some people enter a moment of rage. For example, my girlfriend went to America 1 month, no, this month. They landed in, I think they landed at Atlanta airport. Um, and they came out of the airport and they had a gun pulled on them in the car. That would not happen in Europe.
That's terrifying. Yeah,
And it just wouldn't happen. And they
but
did nothing came of it. They had to duck and everything. Nothing came of it.
what
But
did
but
what did happen in Europe was the Nazis taking over, and
true,
and I know I'm making
true,
the most
true.
cliche like old school argument, but that's the thing that the U.S. has existed for 250 years as a democracy, and it's true. There's slavery, there's genocide of Native Americans, and so on. Uh, I'm not denying that there's been wrongdoing in the U.S. by any means. I mean, we can sit here and criticize a lot of stuff that the U.S. government has been responsible for over the centuries. But the point is, it maybe you don't get a gangster pulling a gun on your head on the streets in Europe today, right? But the way things are oriented, if another Hitler were to come along, another Hitler could take over, and it would be much easier, I think, than in Texas, for example. Um,
But
I'm telling you, we can go on forever on
no,
this
no,
topic.
I agree with you that like it would be very difficult for someone to go and take over a state. And the US is relatively unique in the sense of that you have all the individual states which have their own individual laws. Europe are different countries with
Right,
different languages,
right,
totally different cultures. Of course, each American state has its own like mini culture, but it's
yeah,
like Europe. You have there's a lot of differences
absolutely.
in Europe, and yeah, you could have another dictator coming along, but again, it's kind of been there before twice. It's kind of like one of those things where I think that the likelihood of them being able to turn enough people, there is a rise of extreme right wing ideology at the moment, and there are more people
But you're
turning back
betting
to
on
these
you're
ideas.
betting all your cards on that it won't happen again, and it's happened in times where people thought it would never happen again.
Yeah, but you still have the military of
Which
like you would have to have the Hitler take over the military of one country.
that's what he did.
Yeah, which is what he did. And then you would have to have that military then fight all the other militaries of Europe, or that new Hitler would have to then
New Hitler.
coerce
Yeah,
the other countries into joining him.
yeah.
And if he's able to coerce all the other countries into joining him, then something is seriously wrong. If all the other countries, enough of the other countries are joining in to then be able to face off not just the EU and NATO and the UN, but like those things were all created as safeguards to stop it happening again. So you are putting all your cards on it, but it's like even the fact that no one else has guns, you still have to fight all the other. It's like military versus military, and one country's military isn't going to defeat like 50
I
countries'
I
militaries.
don't trust even all these governments enough to not start becoming tyrannical at some point in history.
Oh yeah,
It's
the
just that
governments can become
I don't
tyrannical.
have I don't have enough trust. That's it. And we're talking about a small group of powerful people, and part of what keeps them in line is knowing that they serve the the people, and it's the people who have the the say at the end of it. And look, I'm not saying that it works perfectly in the U.S., but but at least in principle, that's the thought process.
But
And I like that thought process.
But I don't have a huge amount of faith in governments in general because of of what I mentioned, the nature of people high in power to be
Exactly.
more likely to be sociopathic.
Exactly.
So I don't have total faith in them. However, I also would not put my faith in potentially living next to someone who is mentally disturbed and owns a gun.
That's why you got to get a gun and train and know how to use your gun, and hope that we are able to pass laws that keep people who are insane
But
from
it's not just
getting
people
them.
who are insane, but what about you're then giving guns to not just insane people, but maybe other sociopathic people, maybe people who have anger problems, maybe people who are intellectually challenged,
Yeah.
so they are unable to potentially understand good from bad. Maybe they're unable to
Again, that's why you got. I know you just laughed right now because it sounds ridiculous to you, but I was serious. Like and I'm not. Like I'm serious. I think if like your your own personal protection is your responsibility first, and not the cop's responsibility, or, you know, making sure you have a population that is completely unarmed, and now you have a situation where the balance of power is totally fucked. Uh, Look, once again, we're not going to get rid of violence.
no.
We're not going to get rid of it, and there's
But
going
if
to
the
be
people
different.
don't have guns, then you don't need a gun to protect yourself. That's what it ultimately comes
They
down
can have
to.
knives, and I would rather bring a gun to a knife fight.
Yeah, but like for example, here or in England, you run the risk of someone pulling a knife on you,
Yeah,
and then if
you,
they want my mobile, I'll give them my mobile, and
that's not
that's
a good
fine.
argument for banning guns, my dude.
I think it is.
No, it's not.
It's the
No,
first rule. It's
it's
the
not.
first rule. It's the like in Krav Maga, it's mortal hand-to-hand combat. They say if someone pulls a knife on you, run.
The reason why none of us should have guns is if a robber comes, I'll just do whatever he says. That's not a good reason. I'm sorry.
I think it is.
No, it's not.
If someone pulls a knife on you and you pull your gun out,
Yeah,
one of you is
right.
going to die
Yeah.
or gets severely wounded. If
Sure.
someone pulls a knife on you, and potentially
What if
both of you,
somebody pulls a knife on me just because they like killing people with knives? Then what?
then you're fucked.
Yeah.
Then you're fucked.
Exactly.
But
Exactly. Exactly.
that is what happens to a very small percentage of.
And we're back to the mass shootings thing. It's a small percentage of gun violence. Look, the most of gun deaths in the U.S. are suicide, over half, which is horrific. I think we should have a what's it called? Euthanize?
Yeah,
No,
euthanasia.
euthanasia. I think we should have that. Uh, that's most of gun deaths. Then it's gang violence, right? Your scenario of just let them settle these things, and most of the guns being used there are illegally owned, by the way. And so you have overwhelmingly the vast majority of legally owned guns being used legally in the U.S. Overwhelmingly, I mean the amount of legally owned guns that are used illegally is negligible percentage wise.
Yeah,
Right.
I 100% believe that.
So the most of the gun deaths are suicide, which is people who willingly wanted to die, and then the second one is gang violence, where people are using guns guns are owned illegally or being used illegally, right? By like illegal ownership, right? So then now taking all the legally owned guns away, it's not going to affect those things. Mass shootings, yeah, a lot of them were legally owned,
A lot of those ones, because a lot of them are just normal kids and
and
stuff.
that's why I think we should address it legislatively. I think there should be gun reform, but taking away that right and that balance of power from the vast majority of people who are using these things in an ethical and legal way, um, you know, sacrificing that kind of empowerment of the people to try to solve a problem that is a very, 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 very small sliver of legally owned guns and their misuse, right? It's just I think it's inefficient. It's wrong in terms of taking people's rights away, in my opinion, right? And it's probably not even going to solve the problem fully, because that person that wants to go kill people, okay, I'm not going to be able to use my dad's gun, or I'm not going to be able to buy a gun at the gun store. I'm just going to go to the local gangsters and buy a gun, and that's that, right? And now nobody has guns, and nobody can defend themselves until the police show up. Oh, and the police isn't even trained well. So yeah, in Indiana recently there was a shooting, horrific once again, where this dude is coming out of the bathroom with a rifle, right? And he's going out of the bathroom into the food courts where people are eating, but he doesn't actually make it into the food court because somebody across like 40 yards away sees him. He's carrying concealed legally, pulls his weapon, shoots him, and kills him. He's a 22-year-old guy who was able to make that shot, which means he's been training because that's not an easy shot. 40 yards is a challenging shot, especially with a pistol in a crowded area under adrenaline rush. That is a very difficult shot for your standard person, and that person was able to eliminate the threat. Unfortunately, the perpetrator did manage to kill, I think it was 3 people, but he would have killed maybe 30 or 40 people if that didn't happen. So there you go. And again, I'm not saying, hey, this is beautiful that this happened, but it's a way to start to change the culture, to start changing this culture of mass shooting violence that's happening. The other thing is, a mass shooter goes to places where people are not going to be armed typically, right? They're going to schools where people are not going to be armed. That's part of what they do. Predators prey on the weak, right? That's what they do. They look for places where they're not going to go into a police station where everybody's armed and do a mass shooting. Why do they always go to movie theaters instead of a police station? There might be just as many people in a police station, but it's because people have guns, right? You're not going to go kill you're going to get shot before you kill anyone. So again, that's if we start changing the culture in a way where people start taking more responsibility for their own protection, I think it can make a difference. I don't think that'll be the only thing that would help. I think there needs to be more serious psychological checks, maybe a licensing process that happens in order to own a gun. There's always the argument that that's a slippery slope. That's how you eliminate people's rights to guns. I'm sorry. I think that that is true, but I don't think that it's worth not doing anything. Yeah, I think licensing process, the same way that you need a driver's license to drive a car, should probably be in order. Again, I'm not an expert, but
Yeah, and
definitely.
again, I want to
And in
say,
Switzerland, it doesn't happen, and that's how it works. By the way, go ahead.
and again, I want to say, I'm not advocating here for banning guns because I don't think that's
Yeah,
not a viable solution in any way. And it's like other countries don't ban guns. People just don't feel the need to get guns in the first place.
well, they never had them in the first place. There were monarchies that released their grip, or dictatorships that released their grip. They weren't a population of people that overthrew, something completely on their own, right? Like in the case of Nazi Germany, it was the Soviets, the British, and the Americans with others that defeated Hitler. People had to come from the outside to save Europe. Um, Franco died. He was a dictator ruling with an iron fist until he died of old age or whatever it was. He ruled from 1937, I think it was, to 1974, executing people for not agreeing, for not liking him, persecuting the Catalans famously here in Catalonia. We hear about that. This man just died, right? And now people here, they don't have guns not because of somebody made the right decision to not give guns in the first place. It's because literally it was never existent because this used to be a dictatorship. Um, this is just a very different historical process
but like
background.
in England, for example, like I mentioned, you can get a gun. I can go and get a gun
Right,
if I want.
right,
I don't know. You probably have to fill in some forms and then get your license, and then you can get a gun.
right,
You can't carry that on the street.
right,
But you can go, if you're traveling to and from a place,
right,
you can take that and then you can go into like a shooting range, or you can go hunting in specific hunting
right.
places or whatever, and you can use a gun for like hunting purposes, and or you can just have it sat on your wall.
So
And do you know what I mean? And it's like that. My point is here that I'm not saying ban guns because banning anything doesn't
right,
work ever,
right.
but your argument is more arm everyone, and
Yeah,
then that will hopefully
absolutely.
get rid of the problem.
Not hopefully. I think it
Um,
would. And
I just don't think it would. I just
so
don't think
so
that I don't think that it the the mind
People
of
being in
the mind
charge
of a
of their
mass.
own protection
Yeah, but the
would.
mind of a yeah, but you're assuming a very high level of competence of everyone.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You might be a very highly competent person, but a lot of people are
We're
not
we're
competent at
we're
anything.
talking about ifs, right? If people are able to get themselves that competent.
But they're not.
I'm
They're
not saying in
not. That's the
practical.
thing. That's the
I believe that I believe that they can be. I don't know if that it'll happen. I'm not very confident that it would happen, that this cultural change would happen, but I'm saying that if it would, I think it would solve the problem to a large extent.
I think that
Another
see
thing
a
is,
cultural
hold,
change that I can that and again
uh,
this is like a
uh,
utopic cultural example, but it's like the opposite side of arm everyone would be explain to people that to remove for one remove the abundance of gun shops, for two remove
'cause it
the
wouldn't help, I don't think.
advertising and marketing towards guns. That would certainly help in reducing the amount of guns that are bought.
So can
um
I really want to interrupt because
yeah.
I didn't finish
Oh,
my
sorry.
response. No, no worries. No, I'm gonna push back on you hard, and you push back on me hard, and this is how this goes. You're a dear friend of mine, and that's no need to say sorry or anything like that. No, but uh, you're mentioning in England that you can have the way in which gun ownership works. I think that in the U.S., if you were to again, we're talking hypotheticals, right? These are all thought experiments you and I are conducting right now. If in the U.S. you were to magically replace all the gun laws with the British gun laws, right? I don't think that would get rid of mass shootings. There's a cultural thing that's happening, a mental health thing that's happening that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
In England, in theory, somebody could take their shotgun, you know, take a 12 gauge to a shopping mall in London, right? They're hunters or whatever, and they go and start shooting people with their shotgun. That could happen, but it doesn't happen. There's something about mental health that's not occurring. That crisis is not occurring in England. There's something about culture, whatever it is, it's not occurring in England. But if you were to replace those gun laws again in the U.S. with the English ones, it probably would continue to occur.
But are you saying then that the US has a mental health problem that other countries aren't facing?
Absolutely.
Like, so you think it
I
has a
think,
unique
yeah.
mental health problem?
And when it comes to gun crime, or when it comes to these mass shootings,
But let but let's
specifically, yes,
but let's take guns out of it and look at it
from a
at the base.
psychological
Well,
standpoint,
just at the base level,
yeah,
there it seems to be a desire
right,
to hurt a large number of people
yeah,
in the US, and that desire doesn't seem to be in the countries I'm familiar with, which is UK, Ireland, and
you get
Spain.
mass stabbings in those countries.
I don't know of any,
They don't get as much media attention because it doesn't kill as many people.
but it's like
And the
it,
U.S. tends to be in the center of media anyway.
but it's like there might be mass stabbings in terms of gangs, but I
No,
don't
no, no,
know.
no, no, no. I'm talking about of innocent people. Same crime, but different weapon. That's what I'm referring to. In China, it's been happening as well.
Yeah, those countries I can't comment on, but like
Okay,
that's what I mean. The countries I know, which is the UK, Ireland,
you
and
haven't heard of
Spain,
this.
I haven't heard of just acts of violence for the sake of violence in terms of taking people's life for the sake of taking people's life.
You had
Um,
that van kill a bunch of people here in Barcelona.
True, but and this is going to sound bad as well, but like that supposedly that was religiously motivated.
Right,
Supposedly, I
right.
don't know if they're just saying that because he was brown skinned,
No, I mean
but
he was
supposedly,
I believe he was a self-claimed ISIS whatever.
yeah. So
Yeah,
supposedly, and that again, that's that's a mental health problem that's trickled in from outside. So that is slightly different because it's not a cultural thing necessarily. It is and it isn't, if you know what I mean, because that culture is separate
yeah,
but happens to live in. And yeah, we do get like the 7/7 bombings and stuff that happened in the UK with some
right,
bombs, but again, that's from the same foreign culture
right,
that's in there.
right.
Whereas I don't, as far as I can think of, I don't know of any.
Which is why I think there is a unique cultural challenge of mental health that is occurring in the U.S. I do believe that it is a pretty unique situation at this point.
Anders Breivik.
Because
He was from Svalbard or Norway.
I don't know.
So he was part of. He claimed to be part of like the Knights of Templar, which is like some old organization,
Hmm.
and he went around, and I don't know if it was shooting or stabbing, but he did that. I think it was on Svalbard, which is an island north of Norway. That was probably 10 years ago, and that was big news.
Yeah.
I can't remember how many people he killed, but a fair amount.
These things happen. These things can happen anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, of
Um,
course. But what do you think then could be causing? Do you well, first of all, do
yeah,
you think that it could be because mass shooting is like ultimate glory in terms
exactly.
of some sort of maniacal tendency that someone has, and do you think that maybe because they've started happening, it sets
Yeah.
a ripple off, a bit like serial
That's exactly.
killers?
Well, I mean, that's exactly what's happening, right? Columbine was the first shooting in the '90s. I think it was late '90s. This is exactly what's happening, and you're talking about guys that have serious personal issues that are not getting addressed otherwise, and uh, yeah, are copying a way to get glory, right? Um, yeah, I think it needs to be addressed with legislature 100%. But I think also the solution comes from mental health being provided more readily to people. And I do think it also partially involves people becoming a bit more or a lot more aware of their own safety and more responsible for their own safety. And once again, as I've been stating, I would be against eliminating this right that is afforded to people, the majority of whom um, use that right fully legally, and to eliminate that right, which is important from a more philosophical standpoint of balance of power and empowerment of the population, of the people themselves, for that to be eliminated, just to try to solve a problem that it isn't even clear that it would be solved in doing that. Uh, yeah, I would be against that. So I think the solutions. First of all, we don't know the solutions.
We
But if
never
I'm, but
do.
if I'm, we never do. But I think if we're guessing or speculating, pondering, it's going to come from multiple directions, not just legislation alone. And I think it's important that we keep in mind the reasons why certain rights are afforded to people to begin with, and make sure that we keep intact the aspects of those rights that are still important and relevant, and the aspects that maybe were not addressed at a time that these rights were provided to those people because they didn't exist. Those aspects didn't exist at that time. We need to address those now, and that's what reform would be for. Will it happen? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean,
It's
we're
it's like
talking
it's
we're talking
political
about
suicide, isn't it, for
it's
any
political
le-
suicide for
any
anybody
leader that
and
wants to
any
do it?
side.
Yeah.
And in the U.S. to make an amendment to the Constitution, you need a 2/3 majority in the Senate,
Uh,
and 2/3 majority in a very very tight, very very precisely divided 50-50 um, system, bipartisan system, is nearly impossible. I mean,
mhm.
51% is how you win changes, like how you pass legislature. 51%, like just right on the edge, right, is how any legislature gets passed by Congress in the U.S. And that's why none of those are amendments to the Constitution, because the Constitution requires 66%.
It's pretty crazy as well. Like I always think about this with politics in general because it's similar in the UK where it's often very very close calls. But then it's just pretty crazy thinking that only you might have someone in power, but only 50% of the people want them in power, which is pretty crazy when you actually think about it. It's
Yeah,
like
it's
fit
weird.
and like 50% of people are basically going to disagree with
The
most
other
of what they
50%.
say, and the other 50% might be happy with it,
But
but
there's a
probably
healthy
won't
way
be.
of disagreeing, and there's an unhealthy way. And today, it's a very much an unhealthy way to disagree, and it's because
Wait,
these
today in this
today
podcast.
today in this podcast.
We
No,
only unhealthily disagree with each other.
look, when there's disagreements, it's natural for us to really pick at each other's ways of thinking, and I think that's important. And I think this is one of the ways that we start to make a healthy progress towards a safer future, a better future, a brighter future.
See, I actually think that podcasts give a lot of power to the people because
Same way guns do. No,
the same way guns
Just
do.
kidding.
But I think the next episode, I'll start with bringing guns to all my podcasts so
Nice.
that my guests feel empowered.
Yeah.
But my point is that that like by discussing things in a way with people who have totally different views,
Right.
it allows people to hear. Everyone's got a biased view, but you've got no
Right.
you've got no agenda necessarily by
Not
telling
me.
me what you're telling me, and I've not got really any because I'm not. I'm a devil's advocate, and I always have been. Like I like to
Me too.
push apart, and that's I think probably why we're friends because
Yeah.
we always have these good discussions. And I'm not necessarily disagreeing, but in order to, the way I learn is by pushing.
Got
And,
pushed back.
I got to push back because that's until it reaches a point where what the person is saying makes full sense.
Right.
And they could be logically correct but morally wrong, or vice versa, or any level. But until the logical sequence is finished,
Right.
of why they believe what they believe, who am I to say what you are saying is wrong, and who am I to say what I'm saying is right? Because they're both they're all elements of one problem that need to be discussed. And I think that listening to 3-hour podcasts of various different people, it's for me, it's revolutionized my life. I know that, listening to people and talking to
Which is
people
why
as
you
well,
started a podcast.
which is why I started a podcast, because I want to give a voice to people. I love to learn and I love to talk about different things, but it's given us an insight into different people's opinions in a way that we did not have before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because before, screen time was so expensive and limited that people had to basically cut. They
Yeah.
might have 20 minutes to talk about a topic. They had to cut out
Less,
all of
yeah.
the nuances, get straight to the point, and there was always some sort of agenda. They're being paid by someone. Whereas podcasts are, most of them, free by nature, and it's very difficult to keep up a false mask for 3 hours in a
Exactly.
straight conversation.
Wouldn't
So
it be great if the presidential elections of the United States would involve the two candidates that are head to head sitting down for 4 hours on a podcast? That'd be fucking.
That would
be
be epic.
excellent. And I say, wouldn't it be great? Not just for Americans, but U.S. elections are relevant to everybody in the world. That's the way it is. I mean, what can we do? I mean, I don't think it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just how it is, right? Today, still, the U.S. is one of the most powerful democracy in the world, and then you have authoritarian regimes, and you have the other democracies of the world that are quite powerful as well, and but the most powerful continues to be the U.S. militarily, economically, even culturally, in terms of the ability to export culture, right, with Hollywood and music and brands, clothing. I see people wearing American brands out here. It's natural, right? It's so culture. Anything that is happening in the U.S. culturally and politically has an enormous ripple effect. Certainly in the Western democracies of the world, like the one we're in today, here in Spain, in England as well. And it's relevant to the authoritarian countries as well, because they're the other side of the government style that exists in the world. And so, yeah, I think it's absurd that in today's age, we're not putting the two candidates that are head to head in the most, perhaps the most influential election that occurs every 4 years, speak candidly with one another in the long form where things can really be discussed, right? It's a reality TV show, these debates. It's incredible. I mean, and there's always a narrative, like the way that the debate, um, person running the debate. What do we call these?
Well, I think they often call them the MC, the master of ceremony.
Yeah,
But
this
I don't know if that's for debate, but I think so.
yeah, or the referee, let's say. The way the referee is running the debate and asking the questions, there's usually narratives behind it, right?
Yeah.
Like you'll get one candidate getting easy questions and the other one getting hard questions, and then when look, I'm not really in personally in support of any of the candidates that have come up in the last 8 years, with Trump and Biden and all these people that ended up getting elected. I wasn't, Hillary Clinton. These people, I had no side, really. I really did not support one or the. I didn't like any of them personally. But there was a clear bias for sure in the media. Uh, this isn't me defending Donald Trump, but there is definitely a bias against Donald Trump. And whether or not he is a good person or a horrible person or something in between, doesn't justify
Yeah, I agree.
having a bias against someone who's going to be the leader of the free world. It's just it's crazy to me. It's just crazy to me. Hello, people. Uh, there's people outside. We have a window open. We'll just. I don't
Very
know
exciting.
if you've already mentioned this in
I have,
previous episodes.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it's very exciting. People get very excited when they
So
look into the podcast. But no, it's all very interesting stuff. It's all politics is crazy,
and it's
um,
dicey.
and it's dicey. But like you mentioned, like being the referee or the master of ceremonies, and I was thinking recently, like I would love to be the referee of a debate.
I can't do
Like
it
one of those
because
things
I would get
because
into it.
yeah, the thing is, I think that I think that I can separate myself emotionally and just enjoy the art of debate enough to be able to, maybe not at this stage in my life, but say 20 years in the future. The
Yeah,
thing is, you often have to be quite a disagreeable person. There's
absolutely.
like like pretty famous one, I forget his name in the UK, but he's pretty old now, but he's just so disagreeable. Everything he says is just like cutting, but like to both sides. He seems to me to be relatively unbiased. He's
Yeah,
just cutting them apart,
right.
each of them. But like, it would just be pretty cool.
That'd be
I
a good
don't
one.
think I'm quite disagreeable enough for that, but maybe I'd have to do my own like slightly more agreeable
Right.
version of it. But it'd be so fun. Like
Yeah.
I think the debating's it's an amazing thing, and it is how I learn. I learn through.
Me too.
I can take in information, then it floats around in my head. But the way that I learn it and process it is by debating it with someone, and
Yeah.
that's the beauty of doing these podcasts. Is I get to do that, and instead of harassing my friends who may not like debating,
Right.
or my girlfriend who
Right.
often doesn't like to be for me to debate at her for an hour.
Yeah.
So like it's
You
so
get to
good to
scratch that itch.
yeah, I get to scratch that itch, and
Yeah.
it's
And it's so
revolutionary for me.
important.
It's so
Yeah.
important.
Dude, that's awesome that you found this because yeah, over the years have struggled with not, standing up and speaking up and going when it's not,
Yeah,
appropriate. Let's say, at a Thanksgiving family dinner, it's
yeah,
like start talking about, whatever new state legislature. It's like it's not, there's no Thanksgiving dinner, no politics, no don't talk no religion, don't talk about those things. Just hugs and kisses and turkey and that's it.
yeah. This Christmas we
That's what
actually
it's
had
supposed to
that
be.
conversation with my mum and my two sisters. Basically, sat me down, and we ended up getting on the topic of me and all my flaws. And like they were basically, it was like they're basically just telling me like how disagreeable I am and difficult to talk to, and all these things,
We
and
have
like
this in common, you and I.
yeah, and one of my sisters was like, Connor, and I was trying to say like, okay, but like, how do you want me to talk to you? Like, what do you like? What do you like me doing? What do you not like me doing? One of my sisters was like, Connor, I don't ever want to debate anything, and I was like,
Damn, I
right.
can't
I
can't relate at
I
all
was
to that.
like, noted, and I was like, I was like thinking that, but what do I talk about? And then the rest of them were like, they were saying, yeah, they basically don't like me bringing up topics.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, it cuts out a
You're,
huge
you're
amount of
bored now.
cuts out a huge amount because I like to hear people.
Yeah.
I like to hear what people have got to say, and I like to hear people's different point of views. But it is unpleasant trying to debate with people who get emotional when they're debating.
Yeah.
And a lot of people maybe who don't like debating, that's probably why they don't like
Yeah.
debating.
Yeah.
And I've only just realized not everyone likes debating, so stop trying to debate with everyone.
Right. And then you always come off as an arrogant asshole,
Yeah,
even if that's not
yeah.
actually your I mean, that's my experience.
Yeah, 100%.
I feel like I've come off as that when it really was not. I wasn't trying to show like I'm smarter or better than you for thinking that. It's like, no, this is how we actually really put ideas to the test, right? Is I'm gonna try to present one idea in the best way that I can conceive of, and then you'll do the same, and then we're going to have a competition of
Yeah, it's a
friendly
competition of
competition.
wit. It's
Yeah.
mental gymnastics.
It's
and
ideas. The ideas are competing. It's not a personal thing of I'm
Exactly.
questioning your loyalty to me as a brother or a friend or whatever it is.
And like often people have, this is one of the irritating things about politics and debates, why I just can't often bear to watch them, because no question is answered. There's no,
Yeah.
the debate is so pathetic.
It's cringy
It's
sometimes.
cringy and
Yeah.
I've not ever seen any American ones that I know of, or what
Yeah.
I can remember. But like, it's just, I think this about this.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm
Right.
going to tell you about something totally different that's not related, and
Right.
300 people agree with me, and 57% of the voters have actually agreed on this other point.
Right.
And like, yeah, but you're missing. You've
The
just
whole
ignored.
population
You've just
chunk.
you've ignored the question I've asked you,
Right.
and it's like, what's your favorite color? 7 is my favorite number. It's like, right.
Dude, when Donald Trump was running against Joe Biden in this past election cycle, and I was like, you're seeing the ridiculousness of these debates. I actually when I was watching that, I actually went and watched a debate, a presidential debate, for an election between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. Dude, it was it's such a different time culturally, and it's incredible. They're so cordial towards one another, like saying, like giving a preamble of, I respect your opinion,
Yeah.
and I know that you want the best for the country, and I know that you're doing your best here. However, I believe that the best for the country will come from this other, like, so cordial, stating fact. Everything's matter of fact, and now it's just like, let's rally people up and get them all riled up, and who's able to use sound bites the best to bully the other. It's just craziness. It's so fucked up.
It's also like when you're debating in that situation, it's also, I believe that if you lower yourself down to attacking that person on a personal level,
yeah,
you've effectively lost. Because and what I mean by that is, if you're debating politics and policies, or gun crime and not gun crime, if you
Right.
then make it personal about that person, like, well, if you think that, then you must be
but you've lost
an idiot.
logically.
You've lost exactly. That's what I mean. You've lost
but
logically.
not in terms of getting people to
Oh,
follow
no.
you.
That's
And
what I mean.
That's the thing.
But that's the irritating part, is because when you fall away from the logic path,
Right.
and you then slip into attacking that person's character, or like
Right.
making some dig at the person,
Right.
you've taken yourself from like an intellectual debate into a playground little conflict or something. And it's like, that's the pathetic part. And it's like, questions are not answered, nobody's saying the real thing, everybody's absolutely shitting themselves about saying the wrong thing. So they keep a totally vanilla flow going on, as opposed to letting anything slip that could potentially lose them votes, or this, that, and the other. Whereas like you say, if we stick them in
so disingenuous.
If we stick them in the podcasting gladiator pit,
Right.
where they can
Right.
where they've got a glass screen between them and two microphones, they can hold swords if they want, or guns, but they can hold guns, each of them, but they've got bulletproof glass between them, and they've just got a microphone and a gun, so they can either talk or shoot themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
like
think
it.
we're onto
I like it.
something.
I like
You
it.
heard it here first, lads.
Yeah, and to circle back a little bit into the theoretical physics community and how things are done, dude, these minds, the great minds of these fields, they have serious long form debates about things. It's crazy to me that the minds of the world that are going to be running the world don't.
Mm,
It's just I hope that our generation, I mean, you're how old?
28, 29, well, almost 29.
Same. So our generation, roughly speaking, the millennials, us famous millennials,
Whoop, whoop.
hopefully can make this happen. I don't see why not.
Mm-hmm.
But it's gonna take 2 generations of people because that's what's running things now for something like that to happen. I don't know if it would happen, but I'm guessing maybe Mr. So and so today, who's 28, that will be president in 50 years, which is apparently the trend now for people to be in their 70s to be leading the U.S. Or let's say in 40 years, right? Maybe that so and so will be willing to have long form debates on a podcast. Who knows?
Holographic long form debates.
Where we go to
where we're all sat in our living rooms and the 2 holograms of the presidential candidates are stood next to us debating in live time in front of our faces in holograms.
They
You
can
heard it
also
here?
just do Jiu Jitsu with one another, and the one
True.
who taps out loses.
Or a big dick competition.
A big dick. I think they're already having that.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Okay, I think we're going to start wrapping it up here because number 1, I need the toilet, and number 2, we're at 2.5 hours. I would love to chat more, but we'll
Dude,
do
it's
a
been a
future
pleasure.
episode because I feel like we've not talked that much about theoretical physics. And we talked a lot about guns.
We talked a lot of
we talked a lot about theoretical theoretical theories.
Yeah. The
just
theory
not
of theory.
The theory of theory. Not
We
the
can talk
physics
about
part.
the theory of theory next time.
We'll talk about theory next time,
Yeah.
and maybe a bit more physics. But before we go, final words. This is the Quest for Wisdom podcast. What are your words of wisdom to the listeners?
Oh, geez. Yeah, I would say stay humble and accept that we're not going to understand certain things. And sometimes we have to just realize we're speculating and that we don't have to necessarily dig in to a way of thinking. And that means in science, in physics, in politics. I guess that was a common theme in this discussion, wasn't it? In some sense, right?
Stay humble, we know nothing.
Question everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, man. It's hard to produce
there's some
one.
There's some
Maybe
nice
question everything and stay humble. How
question
about that?
everything and stay humble.
That's the summary of that.
Well, there are some great words of wisdom. Arnold,
They're not my words.
This has been fantastic. I have one little present for you.
Oh my God, you're so sweet. Is it broccoli?
I do have some broccoli you can have if you want, but it is a Quest for Wisdom t-shirt.
Dude, thank you.
Connor
is a legend.
I've got a medium and an extra large, so take your pick.
I'm not skinny enough to fit in a medium. It's got to be XL.
Yeah,
it's just a medium.
That's the medium. This is the XL.
Oh no, if this is the medium, this is for me.
Yeah, I think the medium.
Yeah,
I think it should be okay.
Yeah,
they're quite big ones.
Yeah. This
Arnold, give me a hug.
All right, dude. Good chat.
Awesome.
I'm gonna have a glass of whiskey after this.
Yeah, Arnold was a little bit sad that I had no whiskey for him, but I had to remind him I'm teetotal and I don't stock whiskey. But next time I will get some whiskey just for you, and you can have a glass of whiskey. I will have a glass of kombucha.
Oh, there you go.
That will be exciting for me and exciting for you.
All right,
anyway,
bye, dude.
Farewell for now. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Quest for Wisdom podcast with your host, Connor Monaghan. If you enjoyed the episode and would like to support the show, then please like it, subscribe, and leave a review on whichever platform you are using. This small act is a massive help and is hugely appreciated. You can find more information about all of our guests on thequestforwisdom.com and follow us at The Quest for Wisdom on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for exciting updates. We also have a Patreon account for anyone who would like to contribute towards the running of the show. Finally, I would like to thank the Comedy Clubhouse in Barcelona for allowing us to record here and for their ongoing support. If you are ever in Barcelona, make sure to check it out for daily shows of comedy and performance art in English. Farewell for now.